Hello, everyone. As there are so many people joining this call, I'm going to give it a minute or so for people to flood in. We're running multiple streams today just because of the sheer quantity of people joining the call. And so I'm going to give it a few minutes to begin, and then I will kick us off for the afternoon. Thank you, obviously, for all joining us today. My team and I are always so amazed that thousands of people from around the world, from around the globe, tune in to these calls that we run now. So I want to thank you very much for being here, of course. So to get us started, I always think it's really fun to hear where everyone is from on the call. So like, tell me where you're from. Are you from London? Are you from the States? Are you from Singapore? Where are you from? I always think it's the craziest thing that this is the most international audience ever. Okay, so we've just gone past thousands on the call. People are still coming in. Wow. I'm actually going to Cape Town in a month's time, which is very exciting for a wedding. It should be really cool. Good afternoon, everyone. Right, people are still flooding in, but in the interest of time, wow, from the Philippines as well. That was amazing. Philippines are my favorite places in the world. Um, So obviously, I want to get going with today. So some basic ground rules, as I will always say in our talks, in our presentations, is that we will record everything that we do. So if you ask if it's recorded in the chat, I want other people to just say, yes, it's recorded in the chat. Of course, my team will do it, but everything that we do is recorded the entire time so that we can send it out and add value to people after the call. The second thing that I want to just be very clear with everyone about is that this is not the sort of call where you just spam your link or spam offers to your products or other affiliate products. I just don't think that is a good look. I don't think it works for a call, and I don't want people doing it. And so if people do that and continue to do it, you will be removed from the call. And obviously, we've had nearly 10,000 signups this afternoon. And so the most important thing for us is to deliver as much value to everyone on the call as physically possible. And so as a reminder, everything is recorded. If you spam links in the chat, you will be removed. So we have thousands of people on this call now. Right. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lead Generation Live. The most important thing for me in business is to understand that if you can generate for yourself a high quality flow of leads, of the right quality of leads, the cascade and knock-on effect for the rest of your business is so significant. And I want to explain a little bit more about why that is the case. And so if you have the right customers, as in your perfect customers coming to your business, you have the perfect customer with the perfect budget, and they're interested in the exact service that you offer. What happens to the business downstream is that everything starts to improve. And so I wanted to start with a little bit of a story for you today. So when I was about 25 years old, which is 10 years or so ago now, I ran a business and I made roughly $1 million a year as an agency that built websites for people and did marketing for people. Now, as an agency, we had maybe 5 or 6 people that got in touch every single month. And maybe those people would have a budget of around £5,000 to £10,000 for a piece of work. And so very importantly for us, we didn't have the option to choose the work that we wanted to take on. We just got 5 quite random companies approaching us every month, looking for a website, looking for marketing. And a lot of the time, importantly, they were looking for a bargain. They were looking for a good price or whatever. Whereas for us as a business, what we wanted to specialize in was we wanted to do really high quality websites, really high quality digital marketing, and we wanted to be paid well for it because we wanted to make a good profit. And so a lot of the time, people will ask me, what is the biggest driver to driving profit within the business? And so many people will give so many different answers to that question. Whereas I still believe that the most important thing for the business is high quality lead generation, and that will funnel through into really high quality profit. And so I'll give you an example of my business at the time versus a business that I learned a lot from. So my business, it's called Verb Brands. I was 25 years old. We made about $1 million a year, and we were not particularly good at marketing ourselves. We were not particularly good at driving leads. And then you take business number two, who was a competitor of ours at the time, and they were a much better competitor than us at the time. That business was called Journey, and they specialized in luxury hospitality, so hotels and restaurants and so forth. And I remember being at a conference once and complaining that I didn't have enough leads. And they, in return, said to me, we have more leads than we know what to do with. And I remember it being a very significant moment in time for me to think, like, why does this business have so many leads when I don't? And why are their leads all the right leads? And so they wanted to build websites for hotels. And every single one of the leads that came in was a lead for a hotel. And so I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I don't have any good quality leads. And so I have to take from the bad quality leads to make my money. Whereas in their case, when they had 20, 30, 40 amazing leads every single month, they were able to pick and choose not only the right type of customer, as in hotels, but they were able to pick the customers who had the highest budget for the same work. And so compare these two companies. My company struggling for leads and as a result having to take what we could get, or their company with an abundance of leads and being able to choose the clients who had the best reputation, the best quality, would make the best case study and drive the most profit. And so these are two exact companies competing against each other, and they grew about 3 or 4 times faster than we did. And so why is that the case? Well, for my business, I would get a piece of work that came in. Let's say I want to do brochure websites, but instead I got like an e-commerce website with an integration, a technical integration piece. And so my team had to hire in an external contractor to do that work, immediately destroying our margin. And at the same time, doing work that we'd never done before took us longer. And so for us, that same project, which let's say it was £10,000, we would want to do in 2 months, ended up taking us 4 months because it was the first time we'd ever done it. It was slightly different to what we wanted to focus on. However, if you look at company 2, which is Journey, they had this abundance of leads. And so they chose maybe the 5 projects that month that they wanted to work on. And those projects, they picked the clients who had the highest budgets and also the work that they knew they could do the easiest. And so what happened as a result is over the period of a few years, they kept making 10 to 20 to 30,000 pounds profit per project, whereas we were making closer to sort of 1, 2, 3% profit for our projects, which over time compounded in the most significant way. So as the years went on and we were bad at generating leads and they were good at generating leads, they went from being 1 million turnover to 5 million turnover. We went from being 1 million turnover to 3 million turnover, but we made no profit. For years and years and years, we made very little profit, whereas they were making on average a 20 to 30% profit margin, which means they were able to market better, position themselves better, have a better office. They were able to hire better staff, get more specialists in, do more campaigns, do more events, spend more on research and development. And so within a period of 2 or 3 years, this company that had once been my competitor was so far ahead of me, I can't even tell you. And I genuinely believe that we were better designers, we were better developers, and yet they had a better flow of leads. And so today, I think it's important to point to why you as a business owner, or you as a founder, you as an entrepreneur, you are the key to unlocking lead generation for your business. Now, a lot of people know that I talk about personal brand a lot. And I don't think that is because personal brand is the only way to market your business. Of course it is not. Of course it is not. However, I'll give you an example here. I work across marketing for multiple different businesses that I run. And in those businesses, there are 5, 6, 7 different marketing streams that each one might have, from email marketing to advertising to events to a multitude of different things those businesses are doing. And then on top of that, you also have personal brand. And so why have I focused so significantly on personal brand over the years for lead generation? It's because unlike paid advertising, which you have to pay to get the view, you have to pay to get the view every single time. Like, let's say we get a billboard, you pay for the billboard, you get the views. Let's do a Facebook ad, you pay for the ad, you get the views. Amazing. But each time I have to pay. And so the difference with personal brand for me has been that you are building an audience of people that are buying into you, and it compounds over time. But also you become the tip of the campaign, the tip of the spear, the tip of the arrow for any marketing campaigns that you do. And so I'll give you a little bit of an insight into the last 60 days of my businesses, of what's happened for me, just to give you an idea of how important it is to use personal brand as part of your marketing. Now, I am not, 25 personal brand coach. I'm a business owner who uses personal brand for its worth, right? So that's the main difference with me, is that I'm going to teach you that personal brand just simply makes your marketing better. It simply makes your lead generation better. Like, if it wasn't for that, and it's funny, we have Dan Priestley speaking today, and I saw him say this at a conference recently as well, is that if the benefit of personal brand wasn't so significant for our businesses, there is no way we would do it. There is no way we would spend all the time and energy and effort and money and heartache and stress doing personal brand if the impact on our businesses wasn't so significant. So in the last 60 days alone, while everyone around me is saying that LinkedIn is broken, there's no reach or whatever, this call has had 8,000 to 9,000 people sign up for this call, just from promoting on LinkedIn alone. Beyond that, 60 days ago, I launched my new business, Searchable, which is an AI business that helps you do AI SEO, right? And so in the last 60 days, that business from zero, a completely new business, now is just under $100,000 a month. Now, none of that would have been possible if I had just done traditional marketing. And none of that would have been possible if I hadn't had my personal brand. And so I think it is very important for people on this call to realize that building a personal brand, unlike paying for marketing, is a compounding effect, right? I've been building mine for 3 years, but I've been on and off posting for years and years. And every single step in my life, every single step in my journey, I have been able to use this asset that is my personal brand to drive massive outcomes for my businesses. And so across my agency, across my health tech business, across the Creator Accelerator, and across Searchable, it has driven value because my audience are broadly entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to share a small deck, talk you through my story, give you a bit of an insight as to what I think is really important this year for personal brand and lead generation, and how to think about that moving forward. I'll then introduce our guest, and then I'll hand over to the incredible Daniel Priestley, who's going to do our first talk of the day. So we're all good. So for those that don't know, the important thing about my story is that I've had an incredible amount of variety in the different businesses that I have built. And so, as you will see throughout today, when I give an answer to a question, it isn't based on theory. It isn't based on some philosophy. It isn't based on like how I feel or like whether the clip will look good. It will be based on something that I have done. It will be based on me having been in the trenches in a business, solving that problem, executing that problem, and then moving on. And so I spent my 20s building a business called Verb Brands, and Verb went on to become the world's leading agency for luxury brands. And I spoke about that business a few moments ago. I spoke about it in the context of, for the first 3 or 4 years, I was grinding honest to God, I was working an 80 to 100-hour week. Any of my friends at the time would have told you that I was a complete ghost. I saw no one, I did nothing, I just worked. And the reason that I had to work that hard is because I had poor positioning, I had poor lead generation, I had no personal brand, and as a result, I had no, leverage coming my way and supporting me in achieving anything. However, from about year 4, year 5 in that business, I took on a business coach. I started studying, I started reading, I started experimenting. We positioned Verb Brands as the leading luxury digital agency. We started posting online. We started releasing white papers. We started doing events. I started talking about personal brand online. And that small uptick, suddenly we went from getting random leads who only had about £10,000 to spend on something to suddenly getting watch brands or sunglasses brands or yacht brands or car brands coming in being like, well, you guys look like the perfectly positioned agency for my luxury brand. And so from about the age of maybe 26, 27, I had this massive change. I then said to myself after COVID, and COVID destroyed my business. For anyone that's followed me for a long time, you will know that that was my darkest, truly darkest moment of my life. I had worked 9 years, 80 hours a week, right? I had sacrificed everything I had in the world to build that business. And COVID destroyed it. COVID took all the customers. I had to furlough 70 staff members, and it destroyed what I had built. But I lived in a tiny flat that I rented. And so I hadn't made any money. And so COVID nearly wiped me out. And I remember being like, I have limited funds. I have pretty much no money to invest in marketing. How am I going to tell the world that I am the best marketer for luxury brands? Like, how is that even possible? I'm sitting in a tiny flat in East London. And anyone that knows me at the time will know I became possessed by the idea of posting every single day on LinkedIn, posting every single day about how I could help luxury brands transform themselves to capture customers in a post-COVID era. Now, that business, this is all completely 100% the truth. That business went from a small skeleton crew of maybe 10 to 15 staff members all working from home to 4 months later being 80 staff members doing a higher turnover than we had before COVID. That is how quick attention can transform a business. That is how quick that if you become the most known voice in your space, you can get 99% of the opportunities first. And I actually first heard that and first read that in Daniel Priestley's book. And it's amazing that he's speaking next. But I remember reading that book at the time. That's why this is such a nice moment for me, is I read in that book that if you become the most known in your space, you're going to get 95% of all opportunities coming to you first. And so you get to say no to the opportunities and yes to the ones that you want. Anyway, at 29 years old, I had built my business back to the scale and size that it was, and someone offered to buy the business. And it was that moment in time, and I would say this to all entrepreneurs, I had to take some chips off the table. I had to, receive some value that I had created. And so I sold the business. We had nearly 100 staff. I sold the business for 25 million, and I was 29, turning 30. After that, the plan was always to go traveling, everyone. I was always going to go traveling with my wife, Lou. We were going to go all around Central America until my younger brother came to me with this idea to build a health tech business that helped elderly people. And obviously, that's a problem our family had had. Our family had massive problems with this. And so I joined with my brother. My wife joined as well. We started working at a crazy pace again. And before long, I realized that I could actually use my personal brand and my knowledge of lead generation to really catapult this business. And Lottie, the short version, Lottie went from my brother, myself, and Louise, and a guy called James Payne, working in a room in London Bridge to a 100-person team worth hundreds of millions of pounds. And we just got not voted, but approved by Deloitte as one of the fastest revenue growing companies in the UK. And so an amazing story and an amazing journey. And again, if I look at why that business grew so quickly, lead generation. Everything else in that business was solvable once we had a steady flow of high quality leads. Okay, so then I was like, Louise, my wife, my beautiful wife, I am going to take that time off. I'm going to go traveling, I promise. And so I actually did. I went traveling. And one of the things I said is LinkedIn has affected my life so positively for so long. I wonder how far I can take this thing. I wonder how far I can push this thing. So my side project was I'm going to travel the world, and I'm going to post every single day. And I did that. I posted every single day while I was away. And in that year, January 2023, I went from 20,000 followers to 350,000 followers. And in the preceding year, I went from 350,000 to a million. And so this for me has been a journey of discovery around lead generation and how closely tied it is with personal brand. And so I set up a small consultancy. I charged $1,000 an hour. I was in Guatemala and the slots sold out. I then changed it to $2,000 an hour and the slots sold out. And I realized that the power law was still in effect. I realized that with so much attention and so many leads, I could choose the best leads and I could push my prices. I could have higher profit. And that year, I ended up becoming the most viewed person on LinkedIn. I think second was Barack Obama and third was Bill Gates. And I don't think that I'm special like those people are, but I do think it's remarkable that ordinary entrepreneurs can use social media and personal brand to elevate themselves to a position where they receive outsized advantage and outsized returns. So the Creator Accelerator ended up being born off the back of I wanted to teach people business and personal branding, but I didn't want to do it one-on-one. And so I ended up doing it in a group style. And what happened next is honestly was the most remarkable experience I've ever had, which was I put 10 seats first at $5,000 each for 5 weeks. I did 5 weeks training 10 people. They became the 10 fastest growing accounts on LinkedIn. That was a success. And I was like, this is amazing. This has worked. I then did 50 people, which sold out in 2 weeks. And now I teach the world's best founders and entrepreneurs how to scale their personal brand every single year. And it is the most joyful job in the world because of the impact I'm able to have on people, but also that people are able to discover the power of lead generation and personal brand on their businesses. And so before we move on, the last 6 months for me has been a remarkable period of time. I had an idea that was, and I always talk about this in my videos, the rising tide is somewhere you always want to position yourself. So social media is a good example of this. Position yourself where things are already rising and you will do well, right? Don't position yourself in a market that's underperforming. I saw that people were not using Google as much. They were now using ChatGPT to find products or services. I thought, how does that work for business? I thought, if I want my business to get found, it has to get found in ChatGPT. And that gave rise to the idea of Searchable. I was working at Lovable at the time. I was working in growth at Lovable. And we had already gone from like 10 million turnover through to 60 million turnover or something. And I saw that this rising tide market of AI augmented marketing and businesses was huge. And so 60 days ago, after raising some money, I launched Searchable. We had 10,500 people now, way higher than it says on the slide, 10,500 people, national press, and we're making almost $100,000 a month. And again, ladies and gents, if I can be so brutal with you, the reason it has moved as fast as it has moved is good lead generation, good processes, and a personal brand on top of that. And so right now, we're in a position where Searchable has had the fastest growth in that space versus any other company. And every single day, we are having more and more customers signing up. And if you ask them, the number one place that they discover our business is my LinkedIn. And so if that isn't, for you, a reminder that 2026, huge opportunity for you to build a personal brand and go all in on lead generation. It will change your business forever. And for those of you that are in startup land, your first 100 customers are going to make everything very straightforward for you. 100 customers can tell you everything that you need to improve, adapt, and amend with your business. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to have Daniel Priestley, who I'll introduce properly in a second. Dan is actually like my hero, apart from, you know that thing where they say, don't meet your hero? I met Dan and I was like, he is my hero. So I'm going to properly introduce him in a minute. We have Nathan Barry, who has built Pit, which is a 50 million turnover business, right? Bootstrapped. He never raised any money to do that. And so these are legit people you should listen to. These are people that I have vetted to make sure that they are here to teach you about actual business. Eric Partaker, who is the CEO coach, who when I first met him, he was making millions a year training the world's best CEOs. And he now runs the CEO Accelerator. And he is a close personal friend of mine. He is one of the, I think he's like biggest or one of the biggest accounts on LinkedIn in the world right now. And then we have Sarah Davies, who has built a huge business, as well as being internationally known as a dragon on BBC's Dragon's Den. And so before we get over to introducing Dan, I'm going to give you a bit of a recap as to what the Creator Accelerator is for people that don't know. I've run it now for over a year. I have trained 600 people on how to use personal brand to drive your business. And that's the thing. I don't teach people how to use selfies. I don't teach people how to, drive likes. I teach people how to drive leads. And so the founder edition is slightly different this time around. I have filmed all the modules again, a completely restructured experience around lead generation and building your business. There is a complete focus on how to drive attention towards a product or attention towards a service. And I've been able to compile all the lessons from all of our different students over the last year. And they are some of the biggest accounts on LinkedIn, but a lot of them you won't even know, but they run $1, $2, $3, $4 million turnover businesses. And so how does it work practically? Every single week, there is 4 live main calls. Monday is with myself, where I go over the most important thing from that week, from that module. Tuesday, we actually go over your post and we roast the post live. So you see where other people have gone wrong, where you have gone wrong, and how to improve. You then move on to pre-validate my post, which is Will McTighe will actually show you how to come up with posts that are likely to go viral and likely to drive leads. Again, a very hard skill to learn, but if you learn that skill, the impact is enormous. And then Q&A with myself on the Thursday. You have intimate coach-led sessions throughout the week, which is you get to speak to coaches about your problems and your business. And I think this is the most important thing. Because of Searchable, I'm doing the TCA less. And so I want to make sure that when I do it, it is the most valuable thing I can possibly do. And so our largest stack giveaway we've ever done is you get the Creator OS included, which is a Notion template as to how to run your calendar. And you get 3 hours of video from me teaching you how to create content and teaching you how to systemize your brand for scale. Because the last thing in the world we want is we don't want founders spending their entire days replying to comments and being on LinkedIn and all these different things. We want people to be focused on their businesses and using personal brand and using lead generation to drive value. Last year, I ran a cohort called the Digital Business Accelerator, and I've now turned that into a product that we're including in the TCA. And so if you buy the TCA, you get the Creator OS, the Digital Business Blueprint, you get the GBT suite that we've put together. So how to understand the algorithm, how to generate ideas, how to make hooks, all these different points through to funnel builders and post analyzers. And so these tools are going to be critical for you to strategize your business. And then we have put every single Zoom, every single call, every single piece of content I've ever created into one AI. And this is the AI I use now. It has perfect context of everything I've ever said on calls. And it, for me, has been the most useful tool I've ever used to strategize, create content, and so forth. And so you get all of that included in the price of the TCA. And just before I introduce Dan, we've actually sold out pretty much all the seats. So there's 20 discounted seats left. And by the end of this call, they will go. So there's 20 discounted seats left. If you complain, that's cool that you complain, but that is it. There's 20 discounted seats left. And so I just want to say with 1 minute why Daniel Priestley is just being such an influence and like an overriding force on my life. So when I talked earlier about my business struggling, it was his book that I read. I read The Key Person of Influence when I was like 22, 23, and I was like mind blown by what he said in that book. And I think what's really important is that for years and years and years, before I knew Dan, I would say like Dan was the sort of the grandfather of personal brand. But then years later, when I met him and became friends with him, I realized that he's barely that much older than me. And so he is just quite literally one of the most impressive entrepreneurs I've ever met. The way that he talks, the way that he articulates, the way that he delivers is phenomenal. And so for me, and just double check that he's definitely here. There he is. I am honored that Dan is here, and I'm very happy that all of you get to hear from Dan today.
Man, look at this. I'm blushing. Look at you saying absolutely wonderful things about me, and I appreciate it. Being the grandfather of being the key person of influence. I turned 45 this month, so it's a young grandfather.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say you're like literally just 10 years older than me,
I,
and I was
I
like,
I wrote that book when I was 29 years old.
amazing.
Yeah, I saw what was happening with personal brand, and I've been working with some CEOs, and I wrote that book, and it was just absolutely wonderful to see that it played a role in your journey because you've done incredible things, and it's been magical to watch what you've been able to build and the amount of value that you've been able to pass on to the entrepreneur community, which is really what drives me, this idea of the entrepreneur community. Very good.
Well, I will come off screen, let you present. Ladies and gentlemen, tune in. This guy changed my life. I hope he changes yours.
Oh, amazing. Amazing, amazing. Well, I'm feeling good. I just had leftover spaghetti from last night, and my goodness, spaghetti bolognese tastes so much better the next day. So I'm in a very good mood as a result of this. As the first speaker today, I wanted to start high level, right? I wanted to talk about like high level ideas, high level trends, and I wanted to kind of zoom in on 2026. Let me get my screen. There we go. I want to zoom in on 2026 and talk about the two biggest trends that I think are really, really important that we all start with. Trend number one is obviously AI disruption. So AI kicked off in late 2022. By early 2023, 50 million people a week were using it. By mid 2025, 800 million, and we now have 1 billion people per week actively using LLMs, which means that it's crossed the chasm of the early adopter phase, and it means it's here to stay, right? So it's a very disruptive technology. It really transforms the business model for anyone who does anything predominantly on a screen. If you click a mouse, if you type on a keyboard, if you get paid for your knowledge and your wisdom, then this really changes the dynamic of how your business works. So we need to take that into consideration. A fun thing that, well, not so fun thing that I did at my team retreat is I put up a tombstone with our business name on it. And I said, we died last year because we failed to reinvent. And we need to reinvent the business from scratch. I really love to play the game called Your Business Last Year is Dead, and how would you reinvent it if you had to start from scratch today? See, here's the thing. As we go into 2026, you're either going to be the person competing with the car or the person inside the car. And the person inside the car is the person who is leveraging technology. The person who's running next to the car is the person who's avoiding technology. And I can tell you who wins this race, right? It's obviously the person who leverages technology. For very practical examples, over the last 5 years, I bought up a group of agencies where we bought, actually, it was a little bit longer than 5 years, probably 6 or 7 years. I bought up a group of 4 agencies. And what I've done is I've turned all of them into tech companies that are AI enabled tech companies. And I had them revalued, and the transformation went from 8 to 80 million. So we had a group of agencies that were worth 8 million, and now we have a group of tech companies that are worth 80 million. So it can be, and this transformation happened in the last 2 to 3 years, and all of that value creation was created in that amount of time as well. So it's very, very possible to reinvent those businesses, look for the intellectual property within there, and then turn it into something that is more tech enabled. The other big trend that's happening is demographics. So if we go back to 1945, it was the end of World War II, and all the men were away fighting in World War II. When those men came home in 1946 or 1945, 1946, they met up with their lovely ladies, and we had something called the baby boom. Right, the baby boom was essentially all of those men very happy to see the ladies who were at home waiting for them. And in 1946, we had this explosive growth of babies, and then again in 19 going up to 1956, and then 1964. And ever since then, we've been in population decline, and we have a lower and lower birth rate. But we have this huge group of people who are moving through the economy. In the 1960s, they were early teenagers, and they basically made the music industry explode with Beatlemania. In the 1970s, they wanted to get a used car, and the used car industry exploded. In the 1980s, they wanted to get their first home, and first homes and mortgages exploded. Then they got credit cards, and then they got home electronics, and then they got furnishings. And more recently, they've been investing in the stock market as they've been leading up to retirement. And we've seen the stock market consistently boom almost independently from how the economy is performing. So, whatever the baby boomers are interested in, Yeah, it creates a massive economic trend. In 2026, the oldest baby boomers are now 80. The peak of the baby boom is people turning 70, and the lowest end of the baby boom is people in their early 60s. So, what that means is that 50% of the economy is now owned by people who are in retirement. And that means that we're going to see the largest transfer of wealth in history. It's well, the largest peaceful transfer of wealth in human history, where essentially half the economy needs to wash through to the other half of the economy, pretty much starting this year and going for the next 15 to 20 years. We're going to see a massive wave of money. So, two things are going to happen. We're going to have a huge wave of money because AI is going to create efficiency. That efficiency is going to be reinvested into new ideas, new productivity, new ways of doing things. If you're an entrepreneur on a call like this, you are one of the most highly productive people in the world, right? Most people do not get onto calls like this. Most people do not care about marketing and lead generation and entrepreneurship. Most people spend a lot of their time, just endlessly scrolling through TikTok videos. So you are going to be one of the most productive people in the economy, which means money is going to move to the most productive people, especially if you're using AI. So we're going to see a huge change. We're going to see a big transformation in the economy. There is a big change that is occurring that occurs based upon how you capture the money that's flowing, right? So when we used to capture money in the economy, the most efficient way to capture wealth in the economy was through this idea here, which was a business that had a product and a place, right? So a business that specializes in a product or a service that has a physical place of business or a geographical place of business and has a business brand. So imagine that you want to set up a financial planning business and you set it up in Wimbledon and you basically say, we have financial planning and insurances. We are based in Wimbledon in London and we're called Wimbledon Financial Planning, right? So that would have been a way of creating wealth in the past. And it doesn't work anymore. And the reason that it doesn't work is because people can shop around with products and services on their phone and they can find the cheapest price very, very rapidly. Secondly, they don't really care about how close you are geographically to them. I remember a time where people told me or told everybody that certain products and services would never sell online, like shoes and clothing and underwear. I remember people saying people will never buy their shoes, people will never buy their underwear, people will never buy their clothing online. People like to try on clothes and shoes before they buy them. So therefore, those businesses will always need a retail place. And we know that people buy shoes all the time now. No one thinks twice about buying online. People buy medical products, peptides or supplements, like all the most intimate products. People will happily buy them online. They don't care whether they're physically close. They'll happily buy them online. Um, and then there's the business brand. What we know is the research says that business brands don't get any cut through anymore. Social media is the number one place where attention lives, and social media was built for personal brands, not business brands. So therefore, if you go online with a business brand, no one cares. You get penalized. A personal brand is 20 times more powerful than a business brand. So the new way of doing things is that you lead with a personal brand that is underpinned by not products, but intellectual property. And rather than having a physical place of business, you have an ideal customer persona, right? So the businesses that are doing well today, these are the ones that have very clearly formalized their intellectual property. They've formalized the ideal customer persona no matter where they are in the world. And they've formalized the personal brand so that people can discover them. So when you take someone like Simon Sinek, he has not created Sinek management consulting, and he doesn't say that he's a management consultant. He says, "I help people to start with why. I am Simon Sinek, and I work with fast growth companies that want to have a really great culture and attract top talented people." Right? So he's got an intellectual property, start with why. He's got an ideal customer persona, and he's got a personal brand. Now, his business is massively scalable and profitable, much more than most management consulting businesses. But that's not because of him doing things the old way. It's because he's doing things the new way. Okay, so let's formalize these. Let's actually play a little bit of a game where we have a look at these key things. Intellectual property. So the first one is that you need to develop intellectual property. My belief is that you now need to say things that only you can say, and that you have to find things that AI can't say. So if you were to get a gig speaking at TED, right, and you're going to stand on stage at the TED speaking conference, they don't want you to stand on stage and give a list of 10 things or 10 steps or six things that AI could spit out. They want you to share your personal experience. They want you to tell your story and the lessons that you've learned personally. One of the TED Talks that came out last week was a financial planner whose job was to meet with lottery winners, right? People who'd just won the lotto. And for the last 7 years, he's met with a lotto winner every single week. And he basically meets the lottery winners and he tells you his story of what it's like meeting people who have just won the lottery. Now, that is a story that only he can tell, right? He can't, any financial planner can tell you about dollar cost averaging and, diversified portfolios and all of that stuff, but AI can also do that. But not many financial planners can tell you what it's like to meet lottery winners. So he's leveraging his personal stories. He's found something that he can say that's unique to him. So you've got to find things that only you can say. My belief is that in the last 5 years, you have collected some baggage. Inside your baggage is valuable intellectual property. So, what is baggage? Baggage is high points and low points, right? So, if you've ever had a triumph where you won, you felt like you were winning, other people are interested. How did you get to that point? How did it feel? What was it like? Where did you start from? What were the things that changed, right? So that's baggage based on a high point, but you might have had low points. You might have had points in the last 5 years that were incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging. That also contains intellectual property where people might ask the question, how did you get through that, right? How did you survive it? What was it like? What did people say to you at the time? What did you say to yourself at the time? How did you deal with that? What was helpful? What resources did you leverage? Right? So in your baggage is intellectual property. One of the most valuable things that you can do in the times that we're living in is to pause, reflect, and document. So, pause, reflect, and document means that you sit down and you reflect on your story, and maybe you go through your photo app on your phone and you look at the last 5 years and you scroll through month by month and you reflect. What did I learn in that month? What happened in that month? What story would I share about that particular month? October 2023. What would I tell people about what happened to me in that particular month? You keep notes and then you start to document. I believe that you've got this incredibly valuable asset, but you have to write it down. It's almost like if you had a property, you have to own the title deed to the property. If you have a book in you, you've got to write the book. If you've got a story, you've got to write down the story. It's very important that you document it. You could document it in video, you could document it as a post, you could write a book, you could create a paper. But here's the key question that I've found very useful when doing this. You want to ask yourself the question month by month, did I do something special that would be of interest to other people that I could quantify the results and I could explain how I did that step by step, right? So imagine you walk through your timeline, you say, I did something special, it's of interest to a certain type of person, I can quantify the results, I can explain it step by step. If you reflect on that question about your story, you will develop intellectual property. Now, some of you say, I don't have very inspiring intellectual property. I'm not sure I've got anything that is that impressive. Well, I want to share with you 3 words that totally changed my life as a result of this man here, Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett invited me onto Diary of a CEO. And on that show, I recorded an episode and it ended up getting more than 3 million views. But only 2 weeks earlier, the founder of Airbnb, a multi-billion dollar unicorn business, was on the show and it only got about 350,000 views. And 2 weeks before that, the founder of Spotify was on the show and that only got 350,000 views. And there's little old me getting 3 million views. And I spoke to Stephen Bartlett and I said, why is it that my episode got 10 times more views than these billionaires who are so much more impressive than I am? And he said, relatable beats impressive, right? He told me that they had looked at the data and what they had found is that people who have something that is relatable to lots of people is much more valuable than someone who's done something impressive. You don't have to have cured cancer. You don't have to have set up a colony on Mars. You don't have to have caught rockets with chopsticks. You don't have to do incredibly impressive things in order to have a very big brand. You have to do relatable things, right? Relatable beats impressive, right? Over the years, you are going to collect valuable intellectual property. My friend Lucy Makara, she spent 30 years in the publishing industry. She then wrote her notes on how to write and publish books. That intellectual property was then placed into a new business called Book Magic. And when we launched that business to angel investors, we raised money at a 5 million valuation with 500,000 raised within 2 weeks. And we now have a new business that's worth millions, and it all sits on top of Lucy's intellectual property, right? So she collected her intellectual property, she documented it, and then we were able to turn it into a technology. I believe that you're standing on a mountain of value, but when you're standing on a mountain, you can't see the mountain because you're too close to it. So what you have to do is you have to figure out, how do I get some perspective? How do I talk to people about my intellectual property so I can find things that are super valuable? Okay, the next thing is finding your ideal customer persona. So we want to formalize an ideal customer persona. When we survey audiences, we discover that the top 1% of an audience has 15% of the entire budget to spend. 9% of people collectively have 45% of the budget to spend. So 60% of the people, 60% of the money that you could earn from your industry is in 10% of the people in your industry, 10% of the customers. 90% of people share in just 40% of the overall budget. So what you have to do is start segmenting and start figuring out who is your ideal customer persona. Who is that person who is up here who can spend more money than the lots of people down there? Your value depends on who's looking. So here's a woman called Esther Perel. Esther Perel is the world's most highly paid couples therapist. She can help people to heal from a divorce, right? So she knows how to get couples to re-engage after they almost get close to having a divorce, or sometimes even while they're in the process of divorcing. Now, she has this incredible intellectual property, but it's not valuable to some people and it's highly valuable to others. So if I put Esther Perel in front of these three people, Marty, who's 33 and single, he says, oh, at most I would spend $25 and buy a book. Kate, who's 41 and happily married, she says at most I would spend $2,500 and buy an online course. Nina, who's 54, considering a divorce and has 60 million net worth, says I'll spend $250,000 because if it works, it will save me millions in a divorce, right? So her value, Esther Perel's value, is different depending on who's looking, and that's the power of choosing the ideal customer persona. This is one of my friends called Lee Russell. Lee decided to reposition himself. When he first started out, he was selling to startups, and he was selling to startups who had tech skills, and he was selling them a technical solution. What he did is he repositioned himself so that he could sell to service companies that didn't have tech skills. And his day rate that he was consulting out to went from £400 a day or $500 a day to 2,500 a day instantly. And the average amount of days went from 10 days to 20 days. So rather than doing about a 4 grand package or a 4 or 5 grand package, he started doing 25 to 50 grand packages with a different type of person. So the same work, but just a different customer. And he was able to, I think it was 6x his business by selling the same thing to a different type of customer. Okay, the final thing that we need to do is this piece called personal brand. I love to call this the key person of influence. You're not positioning yourself as a celebrity. You're not positioning yourself as a influencer. You're positioning yourself as a key person of influence, which is the business leader of your brand, right? You're the business leader for your business. You're telling people about your intellectual property, and you're connecting with these ideal customer personas. It turns out that humans love personal brands much more than business brands. Richard Branson's been telling us about Virgin for about 50 years. He's got 12 million followers, but Virgin only has 250,000 followers. Tim Cook theoretically should not be as famous as Apple, but Tim Cook has 5 to 6 million more followers than Apple. People are much more interested in Tim Cook than Apple. Stephen Bartlett has this incredibly well-known brand called Diary of a CEO. Diary of a CEO and his other businesses average at 30 to 40,000 followers on LinkedIn, but Stephen Bartlett has 3 million followers on LinkedIn, right? So it's very powerful to differentiate between your business, your product, and your personal brand. Every business needs all three, right? You want to have all three of these brands. We want to know who you are, what do we buy, and who is the company that sells that, right? So for me personally, I've got this business called Dent. We've got products like my book, and there's me, the person, right? And the way people move through is they get to know you through your personal brand, then they feel comfortable to buy a particular product, and then they join the community of committed people who have bought that product and are on the journey with that product, and they go through that commitment. So think personal, product, then business. It used to be the other way around. It used to be that we got to know the brand, then we bought the product, and then maybe we met a person, maybe, right? But it's flipped on its head now. The key thing that you want to know is that your personal brand is 20 times more powerful than your business brand, right? Your personal brand's 20 times more powerful than your business brand. So if you go online and you communicate on behalf of your business brand, you are paying a 95% attention tax. You are going to be taxed at 95%, right? 95% of the possible attention that you should have been able to get now disappears because you've chosen a business brand instead of a personal brand. I want to share with you a quick story. This is TJ. TJ graduated from university. He did a neuroscience degree at university. And on his neuroscience degree, after 3 years of study, they told him that there were no neuroscience jobs to get, right? They said the NHS isn't going to hire you. They're not hiring neuroscientists. There's not many laboratories that hire neuroscientists. They basically said you don't have any job prospects. He was told that he should go and try and get a job in marketing. And they said you should be able to earn £30,000 per year if you go out and get yourself a job in a marketing department because now you understand the human brain, you'll be able to be good at marketing. And he said, I didn't want to get into marketing. I did a neuroscience degree because I wanted to help people understand their brain chemistry. So what he did is he decided to build a personal brand. He got on podcasts, he created an online scorecard, he wrote a book, he started giving online webinars and live keynotes, and he built himself a personal brand. Today he's 28 years old. And today his day speaking rate is £30,000 per day. So where he was recommended to go out and earn £30,000 per year, he now earns 30,000 per day. And by the way, you're saying, oh, how often does that happen? It happens about 30 times a year. He makes close to £1 million turning up and speaking about brain chemistry. And he works with some of the biggest brands in the world because he built a personal brand. Now, I'm going to tell you this. The personal brand opportunity is coming to an end. In the next 2 years, it's going to be very, very hard to build a personal brand. Imagine an airport where the fog is rolling in and the fog's coming in and the traffic control says if your aeroplane is already in the air, you can continue to fly because you're already above the noise, you're above the fog. However, if you're still on the ground, it's too dangerous to take off. There's too much fog. Well, that fog in the personal brand landscape is AI generated content. We are going to see AI generated content flood social media platforms. I hate to say this, but one of my favorite YouTube channels right now is called Sleepy History. Sleepy History is designed so you fall asleep listening to a history lesson. It's completely AI generated. AI generated scripts, AI generated voices, right? AI uploaded and distributed. That is going to be part of the fog that drowns you out. You've got a year to 2 years before the AI generated content makes it nearly impossible for you to build a personal brand. So you've got to get your plane up in the air. You've got to get 2 to 20,000 followers urgently, right? In order to do that. If you want to be ready for the big money that's going to flood through the economy in the next couple of years, you need to formalize your intellectual property. You need to build a clear path to your ideal customer persona, and you need to position yourself as a personal brand so that you can catch the wave that's coming. Those are the three big things that I think you need to be doing top level in order to generate a lot of leads and generate a lot of business. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. I mean, everyone very privileged to hear Dan speak. I definitely think that if I had to point to one person right now and one channel that I think is the best in the world for teaching business, it's Dan's YouTube. So check out his YouTube. It is phenomenal. He is obviously phenomenal. I have one question because I only have time for one question. But if you're an entrepreneur, you bought into the idea of building personal brand, what is the digital asset you might build for yourself that's going to help you the most? Is it, you're big on talking about wait lists. Is it a framework? Like, how do you give people advice to think about an asset people can download or take away?
Yeah, what you want to develop is called a signature method, a signature approach, right? So it's a signature method that is packaged up with your stories. So for Simon Sinek, it was the start with why signature methodology, right? For me, it was the key person of influence signature 5 Ps. Um, so you want to do some deep dive. The more you've got intellectual property and the more you understand your ideal customer persona, it's so easy to build you mentioned my YouTube channel. my YouTube channel's done something pretty extraordinary, which is it got 100,000 subscribers in the first 15 videos in under 4 months. So I only put 15 videos up, and it took 4 months, and it basically it got 100,000 subscribers. And a lot of people say, oh, it takes 1 to 2 years to get 100,000 subscribers if you post all the time. Um, the reason that my channel got lift off is because for the prior 15 years, I already had lots of signature content that was tried and tested, and I knew the stories that would get traction, and I shared those stories and I put them out on the channel,
Amazing.
and there we go. So invest some time into reflecting on your signature method.
Well, ladies and gents, you can keep up with Dan on LinkedIn, on YouTube. He's a total legend, changed my life. So thank you very much to Dan for tuning in. Take it easy, man. Um, Ladies and gents, as is very much our way of doing things here, I only want proven, verified, high quality entrepreneurs to talk at our events. We currently have 3 streams going, and each stream is about 1,500 people. So 5,000 people live. I promise I will always deliver verified, incredible entrepreneurs to talk to you who will teach you actual lessons that they have learned through doing the actual thing. And so Dan Priestley has built countless businesses. He's been producing content and building incredible things for a long time. And like I say, there is that phrase, like, don't meet your hero, right? When I met Dan, he was more impressive in person than I'd ever experienced online. And so for me, he's an absolute hero. Our next speaker, if he's on, our next speaker is, I think Nathan and I are actually the same age. And it again, like, blew me away when he actually told me that, because he is one of the most remarkable people ever. So he's roughly 35 years old and has
That's
built a
right.
business is that right?
Yeah, I'm 35.
Yeah, go on, buddy. And has built Kit, which is what is it today? 50 million turnover business?
Yeah, a little over 50 million.
Right. So, ladies and gents, I mean, you have an entrepreneur on the call right now, 35 years old. He has bootstrapped, hasn't raised money to achieve this, and built Kit to be a 50 million turnover business. That is one of the most extraordinary statements you will hear in entrepreneurship almost ever. Like, I don't know how many of those people in the world you can name. And so I want to hand over to Nathan to tell you a little about himself, but to talk very specifically about creative flywheels and how you can use content, personal brand, newsletter to create opportunities and leads for yourself. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Nathan.
Sounds good. Oh, Chris, I'm so excited for this. So everyone, I mean, this whole series of presentations has been amazing because Chris is just having us pack as much value as possible into the tightest amount of time. So if you imagine this as a YouTube video, you would have put me on 1.5 speed anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. Also, I'm going to give you all the slides at the end so you don't have to worry about like copying everything down because I'm probably going to go too fast. So let me turn on screen sharing. Just give me a shout out in the comments if you can see those slides. Perfect. All right, so I want to introduce you to the concept that's changed the way I view audience growth, business, and then just ultimately my journey as in building wealth as an entrepreneur. So when Chris is talking about what it's taken to build Kit to 50 million in annual revenue and beyond, what I've seen behind the scenes of all these different creators, it's this one concept, and that is flywheels. So as the founder of Kit, I get this front row seat to what's working for the most successful businesses in the creator economy, right? I get to see behind the scenes of Sahil Bloom, James Clear, Tom Brady, Matthew McConaughey, Dua Lipa, like all of these people, they run their businesses on Kit, and I get to see that firsthand. And so flywheels are the thing that I see over and over again that work. And so flywheels are how Sahil Bloom averages 10,000 new subscribers per week for his newsletter. That's how he joined an incredible list of creators on the New York Times list when his book came out. And flywheels aren't just for newsletters, they're for business processes as well. So that's how I produce a weekly podcast that's really high quality, recorded in person in just a day and a half per month. So flywheels are incredible, but I think a lot of people use that word and they don't actually know what it means. So I first learned about flywheels when I traveled all the way around the world from my home in Boise, Idaho, to a little country called Lesotho back in 2008. And if you don't know Lesotho, it's a little landlocked country inside of South Africa. And I was there working to build a well with an orphanage. And as we're putting in this well, we found that electricity was inconsistent at best. We didn't want the only supply of water at this orphanage to be reliant on having electricity. When they have a blackout or miss electricity, like we needed them to be able to keep going with water. So if you've ever been camping, you might think of a hand pump like this. This is how you get water from a well without electricity. It actually works great for water for the weekend camping trip, but you don't want, 100 kids relying on this as the only source of water. So this is not what we installed. But before I show you what we install, I want you to look at the physics of this right here. So we play the video again. When you pump this hand pump, you get water pretty much right away. But as soon as you stop pumping, you stop getting water. So the hand pump is not what we installed. What we installed instead is called a flywheel. And this is a large metal wheel that sits up on top of the well. And as you get it going, it goes in this continuous circular motion. Now, the thing that's different about a flywheel is it doesn't start right away. Instead of getting results right away, it takes time. When we put this flywheel on the well, it actually was really difficult to get going. It took two of us leaning into it. Myself and my friend Luke were leaning into this flywheel, like trying to get it going. And it was hard, but then it got momentum, and it started going faster and faster. And it got easier and easier. So pretty soon, I could do it by myself, and then I could do it with one hand, and then I could do it with two fingers just to keep it going. So this continuous circular motion was so important. Now let's contrast the two against each other, right? The hand pump gets me instant results, but requires continuous effort. The flywheel takes time to get results. It's harder at first, but it gets easier over time. But it keeps the momentum going. Now, you might be asking, okay, what does this pump and this well in Lesotho have anything to do with business? Well, this is what we call a metaphor. And flywheels are the drivers of your business. They take what would otherwise be these totally separate activities and combine them into systems that run with minimal effort. So flywheels are going to help you grow your business, make it more profitable, free yourself up from busy work. So let me give you an example. I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone has a problem writing the newsletter. Daniel's talking about building a personal brand. A newsletter is a great way to do it. And if you're wondering, okay, my newsletter is supposed to go out every Tuesday at 10 a.m., but what do I actually write? Well, let's have a flywheel for that. We want a content idea flywheel. This is how we can have a system in our business that gives us an endless stream of ideas and what to write about. Let me walk you through it. So up top, we have new subscribers. As these new subscribers come in, what we're going to do is we're going to send them an email, automated, that is a welcome email with a question about their struggle. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we're teaching you how to design iPhone apps, how to grow on LinkedIn, whatever topic that is. We're going to ask this question. What's your biggest struggle related to learning how to do it? And then we want them to reply. Then what we're going to do is we're going to capture those replies into a spreadsheet. You could do it with just a label in Gmail. You could, do something fancy with Airtable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create content from those replies. And then we're going to use that content to get new subscribers. Those new subscribers are going to send us more questions and on and on and on. So instead of instead of going to bed at 10 p.m. on Monday night going, shoot, what is my newsletter going to be about? We go to our list of all of our responses that we've captured from our readers, and we say, what are my readers struggling with? I look through those struggles. I find one that's interesting. I write a newsletter answering that particular struggle. I change the name from Hey Chris to Hey First Name, make it a little more generic and applicable to everyone. And then I send that out. What that means is I am creating content that is directly related to the pain points that my audience has. And with that, I'm going to get more engagement. I'm going to get more reach, and that will bring in new subscribers, which will bring me more pain points. So in your business, there's three different ways of doing things. First, there's scattered. That's where you're doing things in a random, no particular order. And it's the way that most people spend their time, right? They wake up and they say, what's in my inbox? What's in my text messages? I guess I'll work on that. Now, the second is linear. This is where you're doing things in a regular, predictable order, right? You might have something like a standard operating procedure, And this is what professionals usually do. When I publish the podcast, these are the steps that happen. But there's a level up that you can do from this, and that is the flywheel format. So this is like the linear SOP, but it's specifically designed to loop and to feed back onto itself, producing greater and greater results. So our goal here is if you're currently doing things in a scattered format, you got to turn that into a linear format. If you're currently linear, we want to turn that into a flywheel. So with that, let's get into 4 specific flywheels that we're going to use in order to build a $1 million newsletter, an incredible personal brand, all of those things. So the first flywheel that you need, or the first category, is you need a content flywheel, right? So I showed you one simple flywheel. Let me give you a different little twist on it so you can see a few different examples of what could fit in with this content flywheel. So this one is going to be about making a curated roundup newsletter. So there's a couple examples that I'll show you of newsletters that follow this curated process where they bring in content from a bunch of different sources and they share the best tips. So the first one is Ruby Weekly, which shares the best articles, tips, and all of that in the Ruby on Rails community. And the second one is a design newsletter called Sidebar. And what they do is they just share the 5 best ideas and tips from the design world each week. So they both use a flywheel like this. So what happens is every week we're sending the newsletter. That's the starting point. The next one is we're asking readers to submit the best content that they found in the industry that week. What we're going to do is we're going to select our favorite pieces of content, and we're going to use those to write the newsletter, send it out, and get in front of more people. So what we also have this step off to the side where, as the writer, go through my normal content consumption process, I'm going to be favoriting and bookmarking, and that's going to go into the same place. So what happens is every week when I go to send my newsletter, I am going through a library of the favorite pieces of content that both the community and myself have curated into a bucket. I find the best things, I write it up, I send it out. Again, what happens is the more people who go through this process, right, that I send the newsletter to, the more people I have as scouts out in the industry helping me find the best content. All right, that brings me to the 3 laws of flywheels. And we'll actually see these play out. So the first law is flow. That means that activities, each step in here should flow from one into the next. That should be a smooth transition. The second law is ease, which means that each rotation is easier than the previous rotation. And the third law is growth. Each rotation produces more than the previous rotation. Now, if you put laws 2 and 3 together, it kind of sounds like an infomercial, right? It's too good to be true. This is a 6-minute abs type moment where you're like, wait a second. You're telling me that I'm going to put in less and less effort over time, and I'm going to get greater and greater results? Yeah. It works in real life physics, right? I remember that from the flywheel on top of the pump in South Africa. It was very difficult at first, but it got easier over time, and then it produced more results over time. So it works in real life. It works in business as well. All right, the second category that we need is we need a distribution flywheel. We need a way to get in front of and to reach more people. Before I show you this flywheel, I want to make a key point, and that is that even though I've been showing you flywheels that look all pretty, they're designed in Figma, the graphics look good, that's not how you design a flywheel. What you do instead, what I do, is I go pen and paper, sticky notes, and I make things like this, where I am just writing it out with a Sharpie and saying, okay, how does this work? Okay, could I go from here to here? No, that doesn't quite work. Let me try to rearrange the flywheel. What order should the steps be in? Because this doesn't just pop in my head. What happens is it's a lot of trial and error and brainstorming. So this is an example of a flywheel that I'm using to grow on LinkedIn. And I'll show you and walk you through this flywheel now. So what we're doing here is setting a specific goal for the flywheel, right? And so every flywheel should have one goal. That's a key thing. So our goal here is to grow to 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. I write out a few of the details, like this is a low-level flywheel. I'll touch on that more in a moment. The cadence is weekly, and we're measuring it by follower growth, newsletter subscribers, and how many ideas that we generate. So now let's walk through the flywheel. The first step in the flywheel is to brainstorm. What I do is I test a lot of ideas on X, and then I'm going to take those best ideas, see what resonates, and post that on LinkedIn, right? And that gives me feedback and iteration. Once I have a solid idea, right, for a hook, an idea that resonates and all that, I'm going to package it up into something that can spread. So this includes, refining the messaging and copy, really looking in the hook, and then maybe doing some more design elements. The third step is to promote. It doesn't matter how good, a piece of content is if we don't get it that initial traction. So what I'll do is I'll reach out to friends, I'll get it in my newsletter, I'll get it in other places where I can say, hey, let's really drive a conversation on this piece of content that I posted on LinkedIn. That relationship that I build with other creators and influencers really matters because that's where we're going to bring in people who have a following to this piece of content. The fourth step is convert, right? So as we work to increase our reach on social, we don't really control what happens in that platform. It's a little hit and miss. We get the pros and cons of the algorithm, right? The algorithm helps us get reach on good posts, but it also means that our average posts aren't going to get much reach. And so that's where lead magnets come in. We want a lead magnet that directly relates to whatever we're talking about. So if I am teaching, as an entrepreneur, if I'm teaching, hey, here's the framework that I use to build a great company culture. Well, if I break down that, then I'll have a lead magnet where I say, if you want to download this framework for you or download the workbook to come up with your own framework or your own assessment, well, put in your email address here and I'll send it to you. That brings people back to my email list, and that gives me more people that I can reach in the future. And then the final step is an appreciation step. So in addition to asking friends to comment, we also want to highlight and encourage organic engagement on our content. And one way that we can do that is if we have our newsletter, we're going to highlight in the newsletter the best pieces of content, the best replies, the best comments, all of that came in on our post that week. And that's going to send us, have this flywheel of, the better the engagement is, or if I write a really great comment or someone writes a great piece of content on my LinkedIn post that week, it might be the one that gets featured in my newsletter, which really closes this loop. So that is very, very effective. And that's just one example of a distribution flywheel. There's a ton of different ones that you could put up. But my point is within these 4 categories, distribution is really important. And you're going to need a flywheel for that. All right, the third category of flywheels that you need is reinvestment. So let's go back to Sahil Bloom as an example. So a few years ago, Sahil switched from Substack over to Kit. He had 100,000 subscribers at the time, and his goal was to hit 1 million subscribers before his book launched. And so we sat down, we designed a simple flywheel that would allow him to reinvest all of his growth. Before I show you that, there's one big asterisk on this. Sahil did not hit his goal. He only hit 830,000 subscribers when the book came out. Now that was enough for it to hit like number 2 New York Times, sell 250,000 or 500,000 copies. So it did very, very well. But, we got to give Sahil a hard time that only 83%. So he could do better. I'm kidding. All right. We're still going to call this the million subscriber flywheel. And let's break it down. So right up at the top, we're bringing in new subscribers. For Sahil, that was primarily from social. We're looking for his audiences on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we are driving them to his newsletter, both through people saying, hey, check out the newsletter. I write, 2 posts a week. It's on these topics, but especially through lead magnets. He has ones on plan your year and a bunch of other great things that people really want. So we're driving from social to the email list to get new subscribers. Then what's happening is he's using something called the Creator Network. And this is a feature inside of Kit where Sahil can partner with other top creators like James Clear, Tom Brady, Ryan Holiday, and many more. And they recommend each other. This is an amplification step. So what happens is he's going to see a 30 to 40% increase in his growth rate because at this step, he's recommending his peers. All right. Then we're diving into the content. And so it's really, really important that you have a high quality newsletter. None of this works if you just mail it in on the content, right? People are actually here. That's the product that people want. And for that, he uses his own content flywheel in order to write 2 really good issues each week. So none of this works unless the newsletter is great. So that's really, really important. Now, both of those newsletters feature sponsorships, which is how he generates income. Now, then what he does is he takes the money made from those sponsorships and he reinvests it in growth. He does this through a combination of meta ads, and there's a company that we own called Sparkloop, where he can pay other creators to recommend him. And what that does is that completes the loop and gets new subscribers. So what I want you to see, oh, I want to show you this flywheel again in a second, but let's look at it through the lens of the three laws of flywheels: flow, ease, and growth. So let's walk through this again. The more new subscribers Sahil gets, the bigger the boost in Creator Network recommendations, the more people are reading his newsletter, which means he can charge more for sponsorships, which means he has more money to reinvest, which means he's growing faster. Now, if you live in an area or been in an area with snow and you have ever built a snowman, we're going to get a little Frozen reference in here. Do you want to build a snowman? You know how you start out with that small ball of snow and you start rolling it, and it takes forever, right? And then it feels like, wow, we're never going to build something meaningful. But you start rolling it and it builds momentum and it gets bigger and bigger. And then it gets to the point where it is compounding growth so quickly because it's picking up more and more snow. That's what this flywheel does, right? Early on, if you're only making a few $1,000s a month in newsletter sponsorships, well, that only gives you a few $1,000s to invest in growth. But now that this newsletter is really large, over 800,000 subscribers, well, he can charge tens of thousands of dollars for newsletter sponsorships. And because he's sending twice a week, that gives him double the inventory, which allows him to spend a huge amount of money every single week on advertising and grow this newsletter very, very quickly. Now, a key thing about flywheels is how you measure them. So something that I do is I always have a spreadsheet that I track. This is a monthly, the cadence on this flywheel is monthly. And so what I do is those are my columns across the top here. And I'm just going to measure the results of each step of the flywheel because I want to see, is this actually compounding over time? Am I living out the laws of the flywheels, that it's getting easier and it's driving more and more results? So you can put together a spreadsheet like this to track either the effort, the results, any of those things, and graph, is this actually working? Now, the final category is an equity flywheel. Newsletters and personal brands, they are amazing for cash flow, but what about building lasting enterprise value? If you do it right, they're great for that too. So we need a flywheel that's really good at turning attention into wealth. Now, attention is the most valuable currency on earth. Companies and brands spend billions of dollars to get it. And as a content creator, you're world-class at capturing attention for free. But there's that question, where do you point the attention? Once you have it, you can direct it anywhere you want, and you need to choose something that builds equity value. Most people point at something that drives cash flow, right? Digital products, sponsorships, coaching, all of those are good for making money. But there's this huge wave happening in the creator economy of pointing attention to something that builds long-term enterprise value. If you want to read more about it, I wrote an essay back in 2020 called The $1 Billion Creator that breaks down more than a dozen examples of how this works, how to do it. You can go to nathanbarry.com/billion and read that. This is the exact process that I'm doing. I have my personal brand that generates cash flow, through my podcast, teaching flywheels, all of this stuff. But enterprise value is coming from Kit, right? I take that attention and I build a software company that has incredible enterprise value. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of the way that I'm capturing that attention. Let's go back to Sahil, for example, right? He's great at generating cash flow and reinvesting that into growth, but he also is obsessed with this idea of enterprise value. And that's because he worked in private equity before he switched over into the creator world. So in order to think about this and Sahil's search for the right business in order to generate enterprise value, we need to think about the different altitudes of flywheels. You'll get some of these altitudes that are very low level altitude, right? They're all about content. And that is what Sahil's doing here, right? Writing a newsletter, that's a low altitude flywheel. And then what you're going to do is you might have a mid altitude flywheel. And that's about newsletter growth. How do we get more and more subscribers? It's operating on a monthly cadence. It's key to the business, but it's still like a mid altitude. Now what we want to do is we want to go into the highest altitude, right? How are you actually making money? How are you turning this brand into long-term enterprise value? That's a very high altitude flywheel. If you ever read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, he talks a lot about flywheels, but they're all this like macro high altitude flywheel. And so Very, very important. But keep that in mind that there's a bunch of different options there. So what Sahil has done is he has built this agency creation flywheel, and really this idea where he's going to turn a bunch of different, take a bunch of pain points in his audience and turn them into businesses that he can operate. And he's run this a bunch. It's allowed him to test a lot of different agencies, and those have been for design, for marketing, newsletter growth, video editing, and all of that. Each one of these is an equity play. So he's really worked on how do we use those to turn attention into equity. I want to talk about two of these examples really quick. One is Paperboy, which is a newsletter that he and I co-founded together. It took about 18 months to hit 1 million in annual revenue, and it's doing very, very well. And then the other is a product called Wild Roman that he just came out with, which is actually a skincare brand. And so it's a physical products company. And so he went all in on this idea of, building a natural skincare brand for men who want like this simple, effective wellness routine. They've got high quality ingredients that they source and a bunch of premium products that you can buy. And so what I noticed in this is that by default, this is a subscription product, right? They still let you make one-time purchases, but it really defaults to subscription. Same thing with Paperboy, which is his growth agency. It's a subscription product. And so as a creator, your primary focus should be on producing excellent content. But while you're busy creating and having all that newsletter growth, you may be falling behind, right? So what you need is this, some other type of product where you can build this long-term enterprise value. So Sahil has this whole process for testing all of these different business ideas, and this is kind of the flywheel that he uses to turn attention to equity. So walking through this really quickly, if you've got a lot of attention, you likely have no shortage of ideas and opportunities. So it's important to narrow those down, and you got to have these viability filters, right? So to go from, for me, the things that I would need is we need recurring revenue, we need a natural promotion fit, we need a path to meaningful scale, right? We're looking for 1 million or more in annual revenue, and it has to operate independently. We need a step where we can validate and launch the demand, so a process that we could do that with. We need a step to measure and track progress. So what are the signals over the first 3 to 6 months that are going to give us that revenue and attention? We need to evaluate, the scale and the reach. And how do we know if this is something to double down on or stop? And we need a process for how we promote and grow. So at a very high level, those are the steps of the attention to equity flywheel. In the slides, which I'll share in a moment, you can dive into a lot more detail here. But those are the 4 flywheels that I believe you need to build $1 million business, because without flywheels, you're running your business on hard mode and you're working too hard to produce results. So you've got all these disconnected activities that don't feed off each other, they don't connect. And so you can get the results, but you're putting in way too much effort. So instead, you need a set of systems. So things get easier over time, produce greater results, and require less effort. If you enjoy nerding out on flywheels as much as I do, go to creativeflywheels.com/examples. You've got a library of flywheels that you can download there. If you want these slides, just send me an email, nathan@kit.com. Happy to send those over to you. I'll go back to that in just a second. But really, as you build your content creator empire, I want you to focus on less hand pump and more flywheels. So thanks so much.
Ladies and gents, the focus, I think, of that talk for me is like a takeaway that I think most entrepreneurs and founders don't really focus on, which is the attention into equity, which is what I think the best creators do. Like, there are ways you can obviously monetize your audience day to day through sponsorships or through, sporadic sales of things. However, what Nathan just described, I'm really good friends with Sahil. Like, I see it with Sahil. I work on it myself. The best creators spend a long period of time building incredible brands. What Dan Priestley said earlier, amazing intellectual property, and then using that to send that attention into creating equity in incredible companies. The one thing I might focus on later on is that one of the points that Nathan said is like it runs independently. So like an asynchronous delivery would be one thing, or runs independently could be someone else running the business. So Nathan, I've got time for one question. And so 2026, you want to build a newsletter, you want to build a personal brand, and you know that you need to build one lead magnet, one flywheel? Like, what is the format that you think will work best moving forwards? Like, is it a Notion template? Is it a PDF? Like, how do you think about that if you had to give a direct answer to it?
My favorite is an email course. And so
Mm.
what you say is in these 5 emails over 5 days, I'm going to teach you this one thing. And you're going to become, a base level expert in this. What you end up with that is a laser focused promise. You train people that the value is in the email, and that's going to serve well for your newsletter or whatever other content because they're not about like, let me go download this PDF over here and then ignore the emails. It's like, no, no, no. I'm waiting. Like, is Chris going to send me, 8 a.m.? That's when the next email drops. Like, I'm hungry for that. And I take action every day. And you get a much higher engagement rate of people taking action because you parsed out like the steps they need to do each of those days. And then my other favorite thing is it doesn't require a designer, a fancy video studio, or any of these other things, right? It's an email, and you can go and write those emails, automate them, and it will work for you. So I would say, here's one problem that you want to solve, one thing that you want to teach, put that into a 5-day email course, make a nice, simple landing page, and promote that from all of your socials.
Incredible, incredible answer. And ladies and gents, I mean, I think that Nathan is like the most legit business person I probably ever met. I spent time with him in person. He's also the nicest person ever. And so if you can go and look at his writing, he committed to writing every day for a long time. Some of his essays that he wrote are like foundational in the way that I think about business. And so if you have time, go and check those out. Honestly, so worth it. Thank you so much, Nathan, for speaking today. You're a legend. We really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Chris.
Thank you very much. So, folks, before I go on to my next section, where I will present on how to actually generate leads practically, like I'll always say, my team always says to me, like, can you jump up and down the stage and have higher energy? Like, truly, that's not me. Like, I will practically tell you how to build your business. I will practically tell you how to generate leads. I will show you through the actions that I take every day in my life and my businesses, how to generate money, how to generate leads, and how to build big businesses. And I'll give you a scope as to what I am doing these days. And so you will see, as Dan has talked about, as Nathan has talked about, if you create a high quality personal brand, you go all in on that idea, you build an amazing LinkedIn, you build an amazing Instagram, you build an amazing newsletter. If you do that, the compound effect over time is so significant and it can have so many different opportunities for you. And so that is why I teach the Creator Accelerator. Truly, it is a relatively time-consuming thing to do throughout the year to do the TCA alongside running my businesses. However, I love it. I think it is probably the most fun I have is seeing people come in, not sure of how to proceed, maybe low confidence in the idea of posting online, maybe not sure that their business can be famous, that they themselves can build a brand, that they are worthy of that. And it is my job to show those people that anything is possible in life. And that, 5 years ago, you would have just said, Chris is like a small agency owner based in Shoreditch. And 5 years later, I have a book deal. I run 5 separate businesses. I have built 3 businesses that have gone north of 10 million in turnover. And I think all of it is down to my personal brand. And so the Creator Accelerator starts on Monday. We have about 5 discounted seats left. The Creator Accelerator runs for 10 to 12 weeks, where myself and my coaches teach you how to build a personal brand, teach you how to think about lead gen in a systemizable, scalable way that delivers for your business. And we will be there working with you intimately every single day. And the thing about success, folks, is that you first have to confront the fact that it is fucking hard to do this stuff, that it takes serious work and serious effort. And so doing it with another 100 people, right? Doing it with 100 people is about momentum. It is about accountability. It is about doing it together and achieving for each other. And that's why doing it together is so much easier than doing it alone. And so I just want to tell you that anyone who does sign up, and I know a lot of you have signed up on this call already, I can't wait to work with you. It's going to be awesome. Just bring your best energy because I will bring mine and we will drive the best 10 or 12 weeks that we have had. So I want to bring up onto the stage for 5 minutes each, 2 of our previous TCA, the Creator Accelerator guests to tell us a little bit about their experiences, what they've learned, who they are, and really tell us what it is that they have achieved over the last year, over the last 6 months since doing the training, but also in their businesses. So I think first and foremost, I want to bring Alicia to the stage, if Alicia's on. What's
Of course
up?
she is.
How you
Hello.
doing?
I'm
Right.
good. I'm currently on a skiing holiday in Norway. Not sure if you
Oh,
can see the snow.
amazing.
Nice,
God,
isn't it?
I'm so jealous. Well, look, the floor is yours. I'd love to hear 5 minutes on a little bit about you, your experience with the TCA, and just be honest about the value of personal brand for you. And then I'll pop back on in five.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. All right, as a quick background, I actually used to work at LinkedIn, and I was a global client executive advising multi-billion dollar businesses on how to shop on the platform, how to raise brand awareness, how to generate money for their business. But as 99% of LinkedIn employees, I never really posted myself. I had no idea how to craft good content. And I started to make a change in February last year. Started posting, had no idea what the hell I was doing. I stumbled across Chris, started following him, learned from him, which then opened a lot of doors that I decided to hand in my notice at LinkedIn. So in July last year, I was then self-employed, going all in to be a LinkedIn content creator. This is then also where I thought, shit, I actually need to step up my game and like go all in and really understand how to put out amazing content. This is when I joined TCA. So this was like July, August, September. And I'm not gonna lie, like it's fucking intense. It is insane. It's hardcore, but it is so valuable. And I think for me, the key reason why I joined is one, I want to be a LinkedIn creator. So I need to know everything about LinkedIn. Already worked at LinkedIn, but there are still so many gaps. And I think there's no one better than Chris to fill in those gaps. And that was also confirmed when I was doing TCA, but also for me to launch my business, to understand how to really position myself, how to set myself up. And then lastly, doing this with the others. It is a high investment, but I knew the people that will be in that cohort with me, they are all invested. They want to achieve something. They are not just there for like the fun of it. They want to achieve something. And this was just such a great momentum in that group, networking with the other people, learning from each other, helping each other. That was so valuable in the end, that whole package of understanding how to craft really good content that in the end opened doors for me. I landed a deal with FedEx, with Samsung. I spoke on main stage on Creator Fest, sponsored by Adobe next to Grace Beverly. Now my webinars have between 2,000 to 4,000 signups, which is absolutely nuts. If I would have continued to post in the way that I did in February last year, when I was still working at LinkedIn, no way I would be where I am now. So thank you, Chris. I owe you a lot. And also to the whole community that did TCA with me, because it's us doing it together. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Awesome to hear. And I mean, I think everyone, you should really follow Alicia. A lot of what she says is amazing. We're in a group together and we are always back and forth, continuously talking, experimenting. The thing about social is social changes. And so I remember 3 or 4 months ago, I gave some advice on LinkedIn. The advice in the moment was the right advice, right? The algorithm changed recently and like everything is on fire. Everyone's going crazy. And so I think that, Alicia, myself, others, what we're trying to do is decode things live. We're trying to decode how it's working. We're trying to work out like how to improve. And then we take that learning, we pass it back to our audiences. So thank you so much for joining and being so honest and working so hard. And yes, it is intense. It is intense, but it's all good. And I also want to welcome to the stage Heather, who's a good friend of mine. I love Heather so much, career coach. And I want to just hear a little bit from Heather about your experience, but also please do introduce yourself and I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I am not on holiday, as you can see in the background, but I will be in a couple weeks, and I'm pretty excited about that. And super excited to be here with you today. I'm a coach for career professionals, so a little bit different reason for me to join TCA and to be involved. I brought into the program with about 20 years of thought leadership, but like Alicia, I was not using LinkedIn at all to my advantage. I used it for my clients, but I never used it for myself and trying to help me build my business or my brand. I think I joined TCA about a year ago this month. I think it was. And I could honestly say that right when I joined, immediately, everything that I learned about the program was applicable to my business. I wanted to drive more coaches to my growth and to my educational content. But I had 5,000 followers when I started, and that's not a lot when you really want to start educating the masses or providing content really wide. I can happily say I have like 52,000 followers now. Yes, it's wild. I also built a newsletter community from zero because they didn't actually have a newsletter community when I started. And I have 30,000 subscribers to my newsletter community now. So a lot of really awesome things that have happened in the past year. I get international clients now, which my clientele was primarily US based. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a workshop this afternoon with one of my Canadian partners who saw one of my posts on LinkedIn and reached out to me to book a training for their clients, which was a pretty substantial contract for me. And it was from one post. I think that's happened to me twice now, where I've had a couple of people see individual posts of mine and reach out. And uh, with those two posts, I've made like over $60,000. So you never know who's going to see your post, who's going to reach out, but the social proof that you build through TCA is really substantial. Like, and I will just second Licia's comment about the community. It's really hard to do this. It's really hard to come every day with energy and with motivation and also with things moving all the time, and to have that community and the people. Chris is always available to help. He's very accessible. So I think the friendships that I built, I know it sounds super cliche, but the friendships that I've built through the community are so invaluable to me and something I'm truly grateful for. So if you're on the fence about joining this community, I know there are only a couple of spots left, so better get on it. But if you're on the fence, I would say, like, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. I'm super excited about my 2016 or 2026. Hopefully you are too.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I mean, all of us from the studio were like, how have you got 30,000 newsletter subs so
I
fast?
know,
That's
I know.
crazy. Because that's where you're going to
Yeah,
make,
thank
that's
you.
where you're going to make so much of the money, is from having deplatformed subscribers. So thank you so much. So,
Yeah, thanks.
okay, so we are moving on now to my own core presentation of the day, which is I'm going to walk you through strategically, step by step, how to think about lead generation, how to think about personal brand. I have 3 streams live right now. We have just under 5,000 people live on the call with us. And so I am privileged to be able to talk to you at this scale. It is so exciting. And so I want to just start, before I talk about the tactics, with what I think people often put down to a cliche, which is you have to get the mindset of this stuff right. Right. We have to first confront the fact that building a personal brand is not easy, and that just growing on one channel is about understanding that channel, right? You need to understand content. You need to understand value, and you need to understand education. If you look at my brand, you can see that my content performs on LinkedIn, it performs on Instagram, it performs on newsletter, but often the content is actually very, very similar. And so today I will focus on predominantly LinkedIn, but I want you to understand that the game of what you are trying to do is to help and add value to people. And if you help and add value to people over time, those people will recognize you as a source of value and are likely to interact with you and your business, and as a result, often become your customers. And so if a few years ago you'd said to me that my TCA business was able to generate $8 to $10 million a year, my searchable business was able to hit over $1 million of revenue in 60 days, and then, like Sahil, I'm an investor or I'm a co-founder of 4 or 5 other businesses, they were to achieve all that they have, and that the lead generation for those things was coming from my personal brand, I would have said that you were crazy. But now I know. Now I know those things are completely and totally possible. And so I take lessons from Dan Priestley about creating intellectual property, about creating, a stamp on a topic. I take lessons from Nathan Barry about creating flywheels that do the hard work for you in the background. And so I'm going to focus on today, core topic that I know all of you will associate with me, which is how to grow your LinkedIn with the new algorithm. I did an algorithm presentation the other day, and I've really actually worked on, I suppose, decoding the algorithm a little bit more with my team and some of the key insights that you need to know moving forwards. And I actually think things changed more recently than ever before. And I don't say that to like shock people. I say it because with everything changing in terms of algorithmically how posts are displayed, it means that the people that move and change with it will have such a huge opportunity in 2026, whereas everyone else who sort of roughly does what they were doing before will not be successful. And as a result, those who put in the time and make the adjustments will have a massive success in 2026. And that is all I want for everyone, right? That is all I want for those people on the call, is to have success, generate more leads for their business. And then after I give this talk, we have Eric Partaker, who will talk to us about building an incredible business. He is an unbelievable coach for founders and CEOs. And then we'll have Sarah Davies, who will talk to us about building her business. And I will ask her a variety of questions. So let's get into it. If you have questions, put them in the chat. Don't spam links. Focus up, because I'm about to drop some serious knowledge. Let's get into it. So the opportunity on LinkedIn, I think we all know, but I like to summarize it by only 1% of LinkedIn posts, okay? And so the amount of people that are on LinkedIn versus who post creates this huge opportunity. Okay, we all know that. We all know that the opportunity on LinkedIn is massive. We know the opportunity for using social media and personal brand to drive leads is huge. Okay, let's get into it. I want to break some myths and I want to set some ground rules for how we think about success and lead generation. So the myths to break. LinkedIn is dead. LinkedIn has changed. LinkedIn is down. In the last 60 days, I drove 25,000 leads to my business from LinkedIn when it was dead. That is more than I ever drove before. And what do I have to think about why that is the case, right? I think that is the case because my team and I zero in every single day on the most important thing within our business, which is lead generation. And if you had that many leads for your business, you could just pick the best ones, the most profitable ones, the best case studies, the ones that will make you famous and the ones that will drive your business, the ones that your team want to work on. Do you see what I mean? The cascade from good lead generation changes everything within the business. Everything within the business has changed if you had good leads. So LinkedIn is not dead. LinkedIn is changing for sure. The 360 Brew algorithm just came out, and I'm going to decode it for you on the next slide. The platform is too saturated. It's absolute and total nonsense. 1% of people post. How could that possibly be saturated? That just doesn't make any sense. And then you cannot sell on LinkedIn. I have been working in social media for 16 years. It is the single best, most consistent platform for making sales. I look at my SEO business that I launched recently. Most of its sales come from LinkedIn. I look at my 2 or 3 agencies that I own. Most of their sales come from LinkedIn. And I look at TCA, and we run a small ad budget for TCA, but then all other sales come from LinkedIn. So completely not true. And if you ask the vast majority of founders where the majority of their leads are coming from, LinkedIn will be a massive factor, even if they're not that focused on it. So why pursue personal brand is a great question. Why pursue LinkedIn is a great question. And you need to have this locked in up front. And so for me, and I'll be really honest with you, for me, driving on LinkedIn and pushing on LinkedIn and pushing on personal brand has been to give myself an outsized opportunity with regards to my businesses. I want to work less hard and achieve more. Like, I don't want to have to work the hard way. Nathan said this. Dan said this. Every speaker that we talk to today will say this, is that if you have more attention towards your business, it is easier than if you have less. And so my why is always about building more successful businesses that achieve a higher profit margin. And so if you can come up with your why, it's a very important one. Now, you could say to me, what's my why alongside that? And I would say it's helping people. I absolutely love helping people. I love building businesses and I love helping people. And that is my why. So come up with yours and it will drive you every day. Because as I said last week on the call, for those who tuned in, but I have 3 laws to how business works. The first law is confront the truth. And confronting the truth is about confronting how difficult, how hard, how realistic your current situation is. My second one is about finding the unique value. So how do you find your value, or how do you find value in the world and capture that? But number three, for laws of leverage and laws of life, as I always call them, is about committing to the boring. Now, Nathan Barry has been building that business for a decade and a half, maybe just under a decade and a half. Daniel Priestley has been working on personal brand for 20 years. Eric Partaker has built multiple businesses. Sarah Davies has built multiple. These things don't happen overnight. I'm 16 years into being an entrepreneur. So to expect to achieve these crazy things on day one is unrealistic. You have to commit to the hard work, okay? So let's get into the tea, and I'm going to talk you through how the algorithm literally works and why, for you, this is probably the channel that's going to drive most of your business in 26. And if you understand this, you're going to drive even more. So I thought I would just do this so people could screenshot it. No fancy deck for this part. Just what does it mean? And so LinkedIn released a new algorithm that determines and understands content differently to how it used to. And so if you were on LinkedIn last year, you would have seen there were millions of people posting, just garbage content, but it was doing really, really well. You could almost post anything and get lots of views and likes and whatever. And you had a lot of people that were posting content that wasn't related to their businesses. And so it is a language model that reads and it understands your content differently to how it used to. So it's not just clicking clicks and hashtags, it's actually ingesting the content and understanding the content. And so why that is so important to you is that the algorithm is now checking whether your content is matching your profile. And so for years now, I've been talking about the importance of having a well-optimized profile, turning your profile into your landing page. Because if as a customer, I arrive on your landing page, which is your LinkedIn profile, I want to know what you do, I want to know what pain point you solve, and how I'm able to keep up with you and buy from you. And so if your profile is, I'm a lawyer and I help businesses with law, but all you post about is leadership, that is a clear mismatch for the algorithm to understand your content. And so you're going to perform less well if that is the case. And so what this focuses us in on as a practice is about having a very, very clear positioning, a very, very clear profile, and ensuring that your content fits the buckets that are relevant to your business. This is critical. And so right now, go and look at your profile and tell me if your content matches your profile. If it does, well done. How can you improve it? If it doesn't, time to get to work. So the other point of the algorithm, which I think is really interesting, is that 80% of your content should now fall within 3 or 4 topics. That is a key thing, is that you can't be scattergunning content. You can't post about many, many, many different things. And so I have always advised people 3 to 5 core topics is what you need to post about on repeat. And why this is really, really useful for all of us entrepreneurs is that I want to be able to systemize my personal brand. I want to be able to have an easy to run personal brand because I want to have massive outsized opportunity with as little input and time as I possibly can. That's always the equation I'm seeking in my life and in my businesses. And if you want to know the truth, the reason I can run so many businesses concurrently is because I've always set them up in a way that they are leveraged massively in my favor. And often that starts with the enormous amount of attention, traffic, and awareness I can drive through my personal brand. And, I think I have 1.2 million followers on LinkedIn, the fastest growing account in the world. And so that, there have been points of the year that I have generated 30 to 50 million views a week. And so what could you do with 30 to 50 million views? The other thing I think is really, really important to note that for the first time ever, the algorithm is specifically giving 3 to 5 times more processing attention to the first 1 or 2 sentences of your profile, meaning of your profile and your post, meaning that hooks, as in how you hook someone into the post, is even more important than it's ever been. It's important for the customer, of course it is, but it is so important for the algorithm itself that distributes now based on your profile to understand what you're posting about. So importantly, to give you a little bit more insight. Now, for years, I have talked about the idea of posting educational, high-value content for your audience. So now, algorithmically, that is backed up by the fact that saves, as in to save a post, is one of the key triggers as to whether your post will be distributed to a larger audience. It doesn't surprise me, folks. It doesn't surprise me. Now, if you do a post, it's a selfie of you and some like, like low, easy to read post, like why is someone going to save that? And so for years now, a lot of people have always criticized that I push very heavily for entrepreneurs to release education content. And in their favor, they would say, yeah, just do like written posts, a little bit of story time, and all that stuff is important. But at the end of the day, you have to think to yourself, will your customer save your post? Okay, why would they save my post? Well, they might save it if the post itself delivers huge value. It provides a step-by-step framework, just like Dan Priestley said at the beginning, some intellectual property that allows me to achieve my goals. That is why I would save it. And now the algorithm is focusing on depth. And so in the last year, it's been horrible to see like so many AI comments, so much AI crap on the platform. I hate it. I'm really focused on creating high quality content myself. And so the algorithm is factoring in the depth of your content. So if you're commenting on people's profiles, don't do great posts, nice work. You want to do in-depth, you want to build relationships, you actually want to be human. And I was thinking about a way of summarizing this. And I think that like personality is going to be the moat, the moat of your business. Personality will be the moat. And I think education will be the value. And so that is going to be my leading statement going into 2026 is personality is the moat, education is the value. So you've got to know first and foremost, if you're going to post, who are you posting for? What is it that you sell? Do you sell marketing? Do you sell personal brand? Do you sell legal services, accountancy services? What is it you sell? Make sure your profile is about that. And what is the pain point that you fix? So if you were to put together a title or a headline, it should be, I am a lawyer that helps founders deal with international legal challenges. And there are so many business owners that deal with that. Or I'm an accountant that helps business owners ensure that they are paid the right amount or ensure that they make the right profit. Or I'm a marketing manager that helps brands scale their marketing. You need to be very explicit about what you are because that ties very nicely into the points about the algorithm, but also when someone arrives at your website, arrives at your profile, they know what you do. And on every post that they see in their feed, that's what it says. That is, ladies and gentlemen, that is positioning. It is key to have good positioning. So what do I post about? I'm going to give you this as a breakdown. This is how I think about my own brand. So topics that relate to your brand, I post to entrepreneurs, mainly in my ICP for all of my businesses. And so I post about marketing, I post about SEO, I post about personal brand, and I post about AI. Those are topics that I already know perform really well because I have seen statistically they do, and I'm going to show you that data in a minute. But also they relate to my brand and they relate to my ICP. They are things that are directly associated with my business. I try and tie in as much personal story and relatable stories as I can because in a world of AI with faceless pages, YouTube accounts that are run by, AI, my focus is how do I make sure that me as a human being is recognized as a person with a personality and so forth. So you will see I post photos of my wife, of my life, of my new baby, to try and make sure that people know that I'm not some 2D AI generated brand, that I am a human being with opinions, strong opinions. I want to help people and I want to show people that the reason I work as hard as I do is to build for myself and my family an amazing lifestyle, but to help others do the same thing. You don't have to be a broke entrepreneur. It's a bizarre mentality the world fell into. So educational content has to be the core of your brand. I don't care what anyone else says, they are wrong. Education as the core of your brand will allow you to scale and to teach your audience how to do the thing, whatever that thing may be. And so I teach how to do SEO for AI, how to do personal brand, and that fuels my businesses. It's pretty straightforward. That is what you need to do. So Priestley talked earlier nicely about intellectual property. And I think it's really important that, for key person of influence, he has the 5 Ps. That is core. That is core content. You associate that with him. Key person of influence is his. And so you need to come up with that type of language and intellectual property around delivering your service. And if you do that, you will be more recognized than if you don't. You will stand out from the crowd. And that is critical for you. So you should have been sent this in advance. This is me telling you a little bit of homework time. You should have been sent this in advance. If you haven't been, I'm sure there'll be a link in the chat. But I want you to fill this out. I want you to fill out why I'm building my personal brand. What is my 1-year goal? What are my goals throughout the year going to be? What are the content pillars I'm going to post about? What is the content I'm going to post about? Why is that relevant to my audience? And then I want you to think, why is someone going to buy from me? Is it going to be my content that is, about the changes of AI, well, maybe not. That might build you an audience. But the content that's going to convert people to buying from you might be case studies. It might be stories. It might be an example of the work that you've done, or it might be specific intellectual property about how you deal with a problem. So the reason I ask people to sign it is I think there is a lot in accountability. If you commit to something for 100 days, you could change your life. And so some people we see 14 days of hard work. It's the same as the beginning of January. Beginning of January is the only time of the year I don't really go to the gym, because the gym is full of people who are pretenders. The gym is full of people who will not be there in 3 weeks' time. And so I'd rather just go to a quieter gym. And so when it gets to that third week, I'm back in the gym, enjoying life, and it is quiet again. And so we sign it because we're committing as a group of 100 people to achieve the goal together. And so if you're on the call, and I never say like everyone can afford my program, that if you can't afford the Creative Accelerator, you should commit to the 100 days yourself. So why growing followers matters? New followers matter because they're highly engaged. New followers will drive views. And so a lot of people will say like the size of your audience doesn't matter, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. Most of the people who say that don't know how to grow an audience. The reason having a big audience within your niche matters, and unless you have the smallest niche I've ever heard of, which I think is unrealistic, you could have 100,000 followers. And so 100,000 followers specifically in your niche will drive your business to a point where you cannot even imagine. And like, I think everyone on this call is a great example, but so many people from the TCA used to run $1 million businesses or $500,000 businesses who are up at 2.5, 3 million just by having better lead flow and having more profitable clients. So how to grow based on the algorithm report. Let's get into it. So the core elements that I want you to think about is educate, make it personal, and focus on outliers and pre-validated content. So you want to have a study. You want to become a scientist in hooks. You want to become a scientist in what hooks work, why they work, and then how to tie a really compelling hook into an educational story or an educational graphic, because that is how you're going to land a message. People are going to come off the feed, going to read your post, going to save your post, and as a result, that post will be spread. And that is where you get more of an audience from. And so I have seen people who used to post almost exclusively personal brand content, and now they're posting much more educational content. And I have seen their accounts grow significantly in followers, but also significantly in leads. And Heather is a great example. I mean, she's just shocked Josh and I. We didn't know that Heather had grown a 30,000 person newsletter. Like, frankly, what the hell? 30,000 people tuning in to her newsletter on a weekly basis. What's the value of that, everyone? That is crazy. But that only happens by delivering high quality educational information that people want to download or people want to give their email in trade for, So how do you write excellent hooks? So one could be proof of work. So, you want to show what you have achieved as the post itself as the hook. And so we spent 10,000 on this billboard. It got us 5 million views. Now that's great. That's like a nice proof point post that you could look at. You could apply that to anything within your business. Proof of authority would be another one. So in the last 5 years, I'm proud to say we've paid out 3 billion to our investors, which again is a crazy thing. It's like sensationalized hooks, proof point hooks. Now the unexpected angle is another one you could look at. So something contrarian, something as a counter viewpoint. So take the normal viewpoint of society, give a counter viewpoint to it, be contrarian. And you want to be quite impactful with hooks. They have to be short and snappy. And then personal stories. So when they found out I was no longer CEO, they cancelled the contract. And not too long ago, I was booked for a keynote. It's interesting. Why was he no longer CEO? Why was it cancelled? And so there's a bit of like mystery, a bit of confusion. And that's the key with the hook, unfortunately, is that you are competing against the rest of the world for the same attention, which is why I often say to people, do you know, if I had to post one day of the week, which day of the week I'd post Saturday, because no one else is posting Saturday. That means that all the eyes are on social on Saturday. I would be posting and very few other people would be posting. And so you've got to understand that it is competitive. But because it's competitive, you need compelling hooks, you need counter statements, you need interest that's going to pull people off the feed. And I always say to people, do you want to know how you do this? Put your hand over the post. Just read the hook and tell me if you would carry on reading that post. You've got to be honest with yourself, okay? And that's why in the TCA, they bought me a t-shirt that said, it's not the algorithm, your content is shit. And that's because I say that on calls all the time. I always say to people, you think it's the algorithm, you think you've been shadow banned, you think like there is a conspiracy or the world is against you. Honestly, the content is just shit. And the second that you have better content, you will do better. So how to create educational content. You will see stylistically my content it looks different, it stands out, it's colorful, it's unique. And therefore, I want to give you a couple of key points to think about here. You want to nail definitions. You want to make it very easy for someone to see the value in the post, but not when they're looking at it too closely. It needs to be very visual from the outset. You want to focus on a strong design because, again, it's competitive and visuals really matter. I'm going to go into this in a second, a little bit more detail. Frameworks are things that people buy into. People love framework thinking. They love to know if I execute here, then I execute here, then I execute here, and then here, that is how I achieve my goal. And so actionable advice is what I have staked my personal brand on for the last 3 years. I don't want to be a philosopher. I don't want to be jumping on a stage trying to motivate you. All I want to do is to give you the steps that you need to take to achieve your goals. And if I can give you actionable advice and help you, you will associate value with my brand. And so I want you to reverse engineer that for yourself. So how do you do this? I think nowadays this is easier than it used to be, but you want to think to yourself that educational content is about taking really well-known, pre-validated ways of helping. So nothing in these posts necessarily is particularly new, but I'm an entrepreneur that uses AI every single day. I use Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT. But for most people, they're probably going to use one. And so they want to know which one to use. And so for me, that is a perfect opportunity to educate people based on my experience and make it very visual. So on the feed, immediately you can see it. So that's how I want you to think. I want you to think that visuals, frameworks, this is what's going to pull people off the feed. And then you need to actually be giving value. You need to be useful, okay? Now you want to balance this with personal stuff. So personal reflections, personal goals, personal predictions. Like I said earlier, personality is going to be the moat moving forwards with all this AI slop coming out. Like I loved Priestley's sort of analogy of the plane and the fog and all that sort of stuff, because it's true that right now that I think AI content has overtaken human content, which is like terrifying. That is terrifying. So your personality is the thing that's going to make you stand out, but you still have to deliver useful, actionable, educational content. Okay, so what is an outlier first and foremost? Now, an outlier is a post that performs 5 to 10 times better for someone than their ordinary posts. And so do you know when I started on LinkedIn, January 2023, by the way, it's been a ride, I can tell you. But January 2023, I said to myself, I want to find the content in the world that's doing the best. And there were no tools. So I had a spreadsheet and I used to spreadsheet all of the creators that were in my space that spoke to the same audience as me. I used to take a note of each of their posts and I used to look at which ones of their posts were performing better than their averages. And then I used to track their follower growth on a spreadsheet every single day. And so I remember when my account took off, it was like, 20,000 to 80,000, 80 to 350,000, 350 to 1 million. And everyone was like, how do you always do so well, drive so many followers? And it was like, well, a lot of it is based on ideas and concepts I've seen already do really, really well. And so some people are like, oh, that's copying. It's like, well, it's not copying to talk about why AI is useful for your business. It's not copying to talk about how to build a custom GBT or a custom Claude project. This isn't copying. This is using pre-validated ideas based on outliers I've seen elsewhere. And so do you want to know a piece of content that always does well? Talking about habits. Because human beings, we love talking about habits. We love improving our habits, or at least we love talking about improving our habits. And so Atomic Habits, there's 5 books that came before that were about habits that were amazing. And these books are all very similar. I just think he packaged it and hooked it much better and made it much more actionable. So finding outliers is key. If you want to talk about law or accountancy, or you want to talk about building a business or being a marketer, go and find the posts that have already done really well. So what does that mean for you? So growth doesn't come from just quantity of posts. Like, I think it's a crazy where 90% of your followers actually come from 20% of your posts now, which is even more than the 80-20 rule that we're all used to. So you want to really focus on creating the highest quality content physically possible. And then you will have this thing where 90% of the growth will come from 20% of the posts. But you've got to stay in the game. You've got to be in the game to get lucky. And so again, I get a lot of criticism because some of my posts go super viral and drive massive follower growth. And it's like, yes, but I've posted every day since January 2023. And so like I have had the opportunity to get lucky because I've been in the game. So you need to get yourself in the game. So which types of visuals right now on the platform are outliers? So in the last 90 days, based on about 350,000 posts that we analyzed, infographics and motivational quotes have come out by and large the best. And so you will notice that I don't really post quotes or billboards or anything like that anymore. And it's because although they get a lot of views, they're not driving followers. And I care mostly about driving followers because new followers are more likely to sign up to my newsletter or more likely to check out my businesses. And so infographics is what I'm going all in on. So if you're sitting there on the call and you're thinking, how am I going to do my content over the next 90 days? This is where you want to be putting your energy. You want to be building, creating nice, highly educational infographics, and you want to tie in a bit of a personality to those posts. But as you see, if you want to get views, you want to get some initial attention and awareness, these types of posts work really well. And why do they work really well? Because the quotes and the posts are pre-validated. They are already confirmed as doing well. And so you don't have to do much. You just have to find content that already performs well and post it. I don't really do this anymore because it doesn't drive followers, but it's a good strategy to get your name out there. Now, viral carousels that are telling stories do really, really well. So maybe 10 slides, telling a core story. Maybe it's a list, 5 or 7 points, keeping it tight, but having a visual on the front of it is going to be very, very valuable and going to drive massive followers if you land it. Dan Martell on the right-hand side. I love Dan's content. He's absolutely exploded. And at some point, we'll get him onto one of these calls and I'll ask him the question, which is, before your personal brand took off, where were your businesses? When it did take off, how are your businesses now? And I imagine the answer is radically different since his personal brand took over. So which infographics are going viral? You've got sources of data. You've got, I mean, these are niche topics that we've picked for you today. So you can see that if you're able to create this quality of infographic for any niche topic, it can go viral. And so I have a lot of people complaining that they don't post about leadership and culture. And as a result, they can't go viral. But this is kind of counter to that, you know, this is 1,200 on data governance. I'm not, you know, I love the people who are in this space, but it's not the most exciting topic in the world. And yet you're able to generate crazy views, right? And so that's the important thing about content, is that good content will find its audience. So if your profile is data governance, your content is data governance, you make great content on data governance, you are likely to do well. And the algorithm is likely to send you to your correct audience. So engagement, always a hot topic on LinkedIn. Those of you that think that just because a few people comment on your profile is why you gain followers, I have to unfortunately dispel that rumor or that myth. That is like a mass misunderstanding of content. And so, for example, there is no such thing on Instagram, or at least to my knowledge, on Instagram, of engagement pods. Like, I've certainly never even seen one or been invited to one, right? That is rife on LinkedIn. However, you can see that my Instagram, for the same content I post on LinkedIn, goes viral all the time. And yet the people on LinkedIn who do really well on LinkedIn, but do really badly on Instagram, it's the same content. And so that should tell you everything you need to know, right? Now, to do better, you do need to comment more. Top creators are commenting much, much, much more. Top creators comment on average 740% more. And so that is replying to your own posts. That is commenting on other people's posts, driving exposure. Now, with the updated algorithm, you need to be thinking to yourself, I can't post great posts, you know, nice work and all this sort of really low quality stuff. I can't do that anymore. That's just not going to work. Looks terrible, doesn't help. You want in-depth comments. So you want to be commenting with value, with questions, and you want to be doing it in a way that builds relationships. I think that anyone who comments on my post, and obviously I get a fair amount of comments every day, where the comment is low quality or AI, I don't even barely read it. I can detect that it's AI because I'm used to that, and I don't even really engage with it. And so you want to be commenting more and more. You want it to be like over 10 words, definitely, and you want it to be human. And so I said to my team, can you guys just stop correcting my spelling mistakes or like stop correcting my grammar? I'm super dyslexic. And so I would honestly rather have my bad spelling and my bad grammar in my comments because it looks more authentic. So why does engagement help your reach? Well, at the end of the day, if you can get big accounts engaging with you, it's a massive plus. Now, you can't just ask big accounts to engage with you, or maybe you can, and maybe they will, I don't know, but there's no guarantees of that. And so for me, the way that I always think about everything is at the core of all of this is the quality of the content. If you create pieces of content, like last week, I released a piece of content about the difference between a CFO, a CEO, and a COO. And the post on LinkedIn got millions and millions of views. The post on Instagram got 35 million views. I got so many big CEOs from companies commenting on the post, being like, this is the best explanation I've seen of this yet. And because of that, it sent the post viral. So, of course, you can ask and you can beg and you can trade and you can do all these other things. But at the fundamental of it, if your content isn't good, it's not going to perform well. And so I like to give the example of like, imagine a circle in the middle of the screen, just one circle. And with that circle, imagine that you have 10 people that comment on your post. Now, if 10 people comment on your post, it's going to be shown to their audiences. But if the post is really bad, that's where it dies. It dies right there. If the post is really good, then those people's audiences might like it and then engage with it. And those people's audiences might like it and engage with it. And so I would always be wary of accounts that always get the same amount of likes on their posts, because there's something funny going on there. Whereas you can see with my posts, they're like up and down. Some are really bad, some are really good. And that is a much more natural way of looking at how content performs. You know, it's not as forced. Some posts do really well, some posts do really badly. Some posts are aimed at conversion, some are aimed at impressions. You know, so you just want to be careful that you're not losing sight of the fact that the most important thing is useful educational content. And this is just to guide you on how you engage. So if you had a finite amount of time, this is how you should spend your time. Engaging with your ICP, I always think is the most important thing, primary thing to talk about. How can I ask my ICP questions in the comments? How can I post questions on my ICP's profile and their posts? Like when I worked at my agency, I would have my sales navigator set up in a way that I only saw my ICP and I only engaged with my ICP. That's all I cared about at the time. I didn't really know how personal brand worked exactly yet, but it just resulted in loads of conversations with my ICP. Now, trying to engage with bigger creators, you have to be really, really smart about that. If you send me a DM saying, can I please comment on your posts? I probably won't even see the DM, to be honest with you. Whereas if you were to try and help me in a way that was meaningful, I might notice it. And so you have to think about that as a frame for trying to engage with bigger creators, is that they have a huge quantity of traction and views and so forth on their profile. And so that's why you need to be imaginative. Okay, so the highest performing posts, education posts, I want to point to. I talk about this all the time. This is how you help people achieve their goals. The lead magnet post, I want to talk about it in a little bit more detail today. So in the last 60 days, when everyone said that LinkedIn was broken, these posts for me generated 20,000, 25,000 leads. In a time where everyone said that LinkedIn was dead. Okay, so it's about adapting, it's about changing, it's about creating high value content, it's about making sure that your high value content is packaged in a way that looks great and is a compelling offer. And as a result, like I know already, for example, that the TCA has already reached the number that we were aiming at. And I think that that is because the amount of people who came to these calls driven by, you know, GBTs that were super useful, frameworks that were super useful, Notion templates that were super useful, has resulted in a lot of people getting a lot of value. And so the trick here is not to think about my content. The trick here is to think, how do I create this lead magnet, this flywheel, this intellectual property for your own business? And how do you generate leads from social, get people to your newsletter, get them converting? I spoke about personal story a little bit more, but I want you just to think that a relatable pain point is key. So on this call right now, we have just under 5,000 people. The relatable pain point for entrepreneurs is that getting leads is really difficult. I'm talking about a point in my life where I didn't have leads, and now I do have a lot of leads, and what was the journey I went on. And that is a relatable story. It's completely the truth. I build lots of businesses, but it's also relatable for the vast majority of entrepreneurs. And then these posts, you'll see me do these posts quite a lot, and they never perform particularly well, but they show case study, they show transformation, they show my clients that are happy, results my clients get. And so these posts are going to do really badly in likes, whatever likes are worth, but they'll do really, really well when it comes to sales and it comes to inquiries and so forth. So what can you do beyond LinkedIn? Now, I said earlier something that I think is really important to bear in mind. The same content, by the way, that I use on LinkedIn, I use everywhere else. I just recycle it. I maybe change the packaging a little bit. And it is that content that grows my channels elsewhere. Like, I don't make silly videos of myself on my Instagram, or I don't like take like, not that I would wear a bikini necessarily, but I don't take like the swimming shorts photo of myself on my Instagram. That's just not how I do things. I will, however, post about how you grow a business on Instagram, because that is what I teach. And so you can go and see my Instagram started a year and a half ago. I think 750,000 followers or something. The same strategy applies. So you want to think to yourself, okay, the LinkedIn algorithm, the Instagram algorithm, Facebook back in the day, X nowadays, they will all change and adapt, and they will become harder. And so you need to get people off social media, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. You need to drive leads with lead magnets to landing pages. And nowadays, it's so easy to set up one single landing page with one core offer. And so you want that landing page to give someone a valuable piece of information, either for free or for low cost, and drive people to it from social media. If you can achieve that one flow that Nathan Barry talked about, that Daniel Priestley talked about, that I'm sure Eric Partaker will talk about, that most entrepreneurs understand, you will have won half the battle. If you can build a really nice, high converting landing page and do really good lead magnets on the front end. So like I say, 20,000 leads in the last 60 days, make something valuable, deliver incredible value in the hook. So describe the value in the hook, tell people to comment or to repost, depending on the platform, and send them to a landing page with their email. And here's just a few examples of lead magnets that other people have done and I've done. So the one on the left-hand side is someone talking about GBT5, and you can see 4,500 comments. You can see in the middle, that's my GBT, 3,900 comments. And on the right-hand side is Adrian, who talks about media buying, 2,500 comments. So how do you apply this to your business? This doesn't belong to us. These formats belong to no one. I think they belong to you. And so let's look at this. I talk about SEO a lot on my LinkedIn. This is a post on my Instagram about SEO. I just put a new sheet in front of the cheat sheet so people can see it much easier. And that post went on to get like 6,000 likes on Instagram. And so the point is, it all comes back to the content. If you can create high quality content, that is the key. So building a personal brand takes forever. It took me 3 years to get here. And obviously, I have gone all in on this. Josh and I have worked together for a long time. And the amount of content we have seen and analyzed and created and thought of and sweated is crazy. We've gone all in on this. And because of the lead generation for our businesses, it has resulted in highly profitable, broad businesses. And I think for you, the key is like, how can you execute this fast? Because social is getting harder, as Daniel Priestley said. So a reminder on the Creator Accelerator for those, like, I don't know, 1,000 new people who have joined the call since I started talking. The Creator Accelerator is 10 weeks. It's super intense. And I say that because if you join, I want you to work hard to achieve your goals, and I want you to leave. And like, my favorite thing about the people I always get to talk on these is that I normally pick the people who are a little bit cynical to begin with. So people are like, oh, is it going to be transformational for me? So reach out to people, ask them questions, see if it worked for them. But myself and Josh and our 7 incredible fast-growing creators will train you over 10 to 12 weeks how to grow your personal brand and generate leads. These are some of the results that we've had. So you can check out what people have done, what they've achieved, what they've sold, what they've succeeded at. And I think that the most important thing for you to take away is I don't care about followers. Like, it's not something that I care about for my businesses. It doesn't make any sense to care about them for my businesses. And so it is far more than followers. The whole thing is about how to generate customers on the front end. And so if you can do that, everything becomes easier. So this is a QR code if you want to check out loads of case studies. I think it's very important that you do your research before you buy anything. So check out the case studies, make sure that you're aware. And then what is new in the TCA this time round? So brand new modules. We've refilmed everything, which is crazy, incredibly time consuming. We've completely restructured the experience. We focused it very much on how to use personal brand to drive business success, whereas previously it was a little bit more audience focused. And over the 10 weeks, you get 4 live calls a week, 2 led by myself. You get intimate clinics with the coaches to solve problems and challenges. You get a private community of founders who are building alongside you, and you get comprehensive modules on everything from content creation through to building lead magnets and generating revenue. And so it includes the Creator OS, which is a Notion template as to how to manage your content. It includes the digital business blueprint, which is a 10-week cohort I ran last year. This is for free. So this is included for free. And you get this, the Creator OS, the GBT suite, and the Chris AI coach, which is something that we've built over the last few months. Every single Loom, Zoom, coaching, YouTube I've ever done is included here. And so I actually use this myself now day to day to help me strategize my business and think about marketing and content. We start in 4 days. So before I move on to the next speaker, we start in 4 days' time. I think there might be like a handful of discounted seats left. It doesn't mean that you can't buy over the weekend. It just means that you won't get the discount. So you get discounted seats, which I should have here. Discounted seats. You get the value stack, and you get to work with us as we show you how to transform your business and to transform your personal brand. If you have any questions, if you're sitting on the fence, check out the work that we've done, check out the people we've worked with, message us, ask questions. We will be really honest always about one fact that remains true, that we don't tell you a trick. There is no hack. There is no engagement group. There's no like special sauce that we're going to tell you that's going to transform things quickly. We are going to tell you that this thing is really hard. And this thing takes up loads and loads and loads of time. And you have to work really, really, really hard at it. But if you do that, you will unlock insane value for yourself and for your business. Let me just check on my timings. So the next part of today is my very good friend, Eric Partaker. Now, Eric and I are actually best friends these days, which is so incredibly nice. We had dinner together just before my son was born. He bought me a baby Bjorn, which is where you rock the child in. By the way, if you're going to have a kid, that is the thing you want to buy. It's like the most valuable product you could ever buy. It's so helpful. But I think to take you back a little bit, Eric and I have been on a bit of a journey together, which is we met when we had no followers on LinkedIn. We met when our businesses were literally a shadow of what they are now. And together we became kind of accountability partners and buddies. I mean, for me, he was a huge inspiration because I was really burnt out at the time that I met Eric. And Eric had this incredible business that was generating millions in revenue, teaching the world's best CEOs how to develop and build their businesses. And I always remember thinking it was just the most remarkable thing that he had managed to achieve. And here he is. So we have both one of my best friends in the world, someone that I hope I know forever and ever and ever, but also I think the world's best CEO coach. And hopefully today he will be able to educate you a little bit on how to improve your business in the coming year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. Super excited to be here. Yeah, we've had quite the journey, huh? I mean, it's been crazy. I remember when I pinged you in like it's about 3 years ago or so on LinkedIn saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, looks like you're trying to grow on LinkedIn. So am I. Should we try to put our heads together on this and see if we can kind of crack the code?"
And I think we did.
Yeah, I think we did. The accounts are pretty much in lockstep, and yeah, very crazy journey, and I think it's safe to say too, right? Like neither of us, we couldn't have anticipated,
No.
the journey and where it would go to. And there's so many incredible benefits that come from um, just really, becoming a master of your own universe when it comes to sales, when it comes to building an audience, when it comes to generating leads. And and if you put the time and effort in, it literally is life changing. I know it's been that way for me. I know it's been that way for you, Chris. Um, and and with everything that you've done with the Creator Accelerator, it looks like it's been, certainly life changing for, hundreds, if not getting close to, I think you're over thousands of people now, right? So
Yeah.
amazing.
Well,
Well,
look, I will hand over to you. Thank you very much for joining. Everyone, listen to the words this man has to say. He changed my life. So listen up.
awesome. Okay, I'm going to do a quick screen share here and we will get going. So I'm going to talk about something I'm quite passionate about, which is sales growth. And but in the lens of not just growing your sales, but how do we 10x your sales? And this is a word that 10x, I mean, is it a word? Is it a word? Is it a noun? Is it a verb? What is it? It's certainly a concept, and it's certainly something that we all get and we all relate to. And of course, it has to be 10x. For example, if this presentation said 3 levers to 9x your sales or 11x your sales, for whatever reason, that wouldn't work. So we like to think in these kind of terms. And lead generation is obviously a part of this, quick sneak peek, that will be one of the 3 levers. But there's also a very exciting formula that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Um, I'm almost positive you've never thought of it in this way before. I'm pretty sure this will be the first time that you've ever broken it down in this way. This is something that was in this way of thinking was something instilled into me in my very early part of my career. So I'm 50 years old, so I've been around the block. I started my career in 1999 at McKinsey and Company. And at McKinsey, I just learned the incredible power of critical thinking, of being able to take what seems to be a complex problem, break it down into its component parts, and to solve for each of the components. And when you do that, not only does it make what seems to be insurmountable or unfathomable more attainable, more realistic, but also becomes more exciting because you can then more easily design projects, initiatives, and stack resources against the problems that you're trying to solve. Now, this directly relates to what I'm going to be taking you through today with regard to how to 10x your sales in a more simplified way. After McKinsey I managed a McKinsey sponsored nonprofit for a while. I did a bit of private equity for a while. Then I was part of the early team at Skype. So I feel blessed and fortunate to have been part of and helped, build one of the very early unicorn success stories, at least on this side of the pond, even though I have an American accent. So I also live I live in Portugal now. And it was an incredible journey, an absolute rocket ship of a journey. Um, Skype got sold several times to Microsoft. In the end, it was put to sleep not too long ago, which is kind of sad. But the first transaction, the one that I helped build up to, was the initial transaction. So we went from virtually not, well, literally nothing to a $2.5 billion sale to eBay in the space of a few years. And I've been a founder, I've been a CEO. I was recognized as the CEO of the year back in 2019. My point is, I've lived the founder to CEO struggle, so I know firsthand what that feels like. And this is a laundry list of things that I felt during, my journey. Maybe you felt some of these. I've felt all of these. So overwhelmed, feeling trapped in daily operations, feeling like you're the bottleneck. You delegate things and they boomerang back to you. You feel isolated in your role. You're wondering, where the hell is my autonomous leadership team? Your growth is stagnating. You're lacking systems. You don't feel like you're intentional and you're constantly firefighting. And the reason I felt all of that is because I realized that during my journey, I had no idea what I was doing. Because after all, there's no CEO training or school. And today is a taster of something that I've built recently, which is called the Founder and CEO Accelerator. It's just a program that helps you scale as a founder and CEO. And one of the things that we talk about in the accelerator is how to scale your company, including your sales. And so today I want to take you through a really simple way to reverse engineer 10x growth. But let's start with why think 10x. Well, let me come back actually before you start reading those words. When we were building Skype, our tagline was the whole world can talk for free. The whole damn planet, like right from the outset, it was beyond a 10x goal. It was 100x, whatever you want to call it. And because we thought of a goal so big right from the outset, the act of doing that literally changed the way we thought. Astro Teller, he heads up the moonshot factory for Google X, Google's most ambitious projects. He wrote a piece about this in 2013, The Power of 10x Thinking. He wrote a piece for Wired.com where he talked about how when you think big, very, very big, it literally changes the structure of the problem itself, makes you think in completely different ways, in ways that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And it also counterintuitively becomes easier to achieve because it narrows the path to achievement in that there's a myriad of ways, for example, that you can grow something by a small amount, right? But there tends to be much fewer ways that you can grow something, in a quite big way. Let me give you, I'm going to make up an example very quickly here. So let's say, for example, I have a founder and she is doing $1 million a year in sales, and she gets her sales by making phone calls. And I say, look, let's get to 1.1 million, so 10% growth. Well, she can say, well, I'll add an extra hour to the day. I'll make more calls and that will work. And if I pushed her, she could probably come up with like 20 other different ways to make an extra 100K. But if instead I said, no, you have to get to 10 million, you have to 10x. Now that breaks the brain. There's not enough hours in the day. She can't possibly keep doing what she was doing to achieve that same goal. And therein lies the stimulus for innovation, because you then think in terms of more multiplier terms. Whose distribution can I piggyback on? What are the strategic partnerships that I can create or leverage? How do I create essentially more leverage in what I'm doing to create more exponential rather than incremental growth? And so this is why I challenge everyone to think in 10x. It will illuminate a path forward that you are not currently seeing. And the CEOs who achieve breakthrough growth, as I write here, they don't ask, how do we grow 10%? They ask, what would it take to grow 10x? And the way to do it is actually a lot simpler than you think. Now, there's multiple ways you can grow 10x. We're not going to go into all the different ways here, but I'm doing this for illustrative purposes. I want you to see how if you break things down, something that is big, into its component parts, that the components are much easier to solve for than the whole, and quickly add up to that whole. So if you just focus on three things, so pricing, are you charging what you're worth? Close rates, can you systematically win deals? And then acquisition, so this is the lead gen part. Are you scaling and optimizing the right channels? Just those three levers alone will allow you to 10x your business, especially if you use my 3172 formula. So this magical little formula does magical little things. So if you have 3 times more qualified leads, if you 1.7 times your close rate and 2x your average deal size, whether that's thought of in terms of ACV or pricing, let's look what happens. So let's say you have a business that has 1,000 leads, you close 20% of them, and your average contract value is 10,000. That business will do 2 million a year. Let's apply the 3172 formula. If we 3 times the leads, increase the close rate from 20% to 34%, and double the ACV, these individually don't seem like far-fetched things to do. They're not easy, but they're not like they don't blow you out of the water. Like, how the hell could I possibly do that? And these things stack. And when they stack, the 2 million goes to 20.4 million. Why? Because you've just 10.2x the business. Now, once again, because I've taken what is a complex problem, how the hell do I 10x, and broke it into its component parts, the components are easier to solve for. So let's go into each. Now, look, I'm going to give you a link when we get to the end. If you feel like we're going too rapidly through this, don't worry. I'm going to give you a link. It's going to be shared in the chat. As a matter of fact, if Megan or Josh, I've DM'd it to you. If feel free to share it in the chat with folks right now. There's a link for people to download the slides here. So if we go too quickly, don't worry. Just soak this in as a first run, and you're going to get access to the slides that you can kind of ponder this a little bit more deeply, or perhaps go through it with relevant team members to design goals, projects, and initiatives against these areas. So this is just to stimulate your thinking and to help you go from impossible, which is probably where you currently are, to inevitable, right? By breaking things down. So 3x your leads. So first off, I mean, you're definitely with the right person here with Chris. I mean, if there's a person on the planet who knows lead gen, you are in great hands. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this one because, again, what Chris is offering, you hear and what you've seen today is, a fantastic way to go about lead gen. But lead gen doesn't equal more leads. This is a common fallacy. So most teams will focus on volume, but generating more leads won't solve for poor fit, wasted time, low conversion. You want quality over quantity, right message, right person, right time. And that starts with making sure you have your ideal customer profile. Again, as we're going through this, don't try to take in every single note. You're going to get the link. You can sign up, get the slides. Just go through this and ask yourself the question, to what degree does this sound like an area that I've already dialed in versus, I need to think about this a little bit more. And that's what you can do afterwards. So with your ICP, you need to be knowing everything about them, their demographics, needs, budget, decision-making, fit. Point here is that you want to filter hard and qualify early. And inbound plus outbound testing is what will generate predictability. So both Chris and I, each with a million plus following on LinkedIn, we've certainly mastered the content game when it comes to inbound. And that was an experiment. We didn't know for sure if it would work, but we've proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it not only works for us, but it works for countless other people as well. And there are multiple other levers that you can be pulling. And then outbound as well. So you go to them, targeted outreach, ads, cold email, strategic DMs. Now, the best teams will try both, run experiments, and then track performance by channel to figure out their 80-20, the 20% of the things they should focus on for 80% of the growth that they're seeking. So a quick question is, where are your best leads coming from? And I challenge you, map your last 10 deals. Where did they originate? Were they inbound, outbound? How long did they take to close? What made them qualified? It's a game of pattern recognition. One of the hallmarks of a great CEO, of a great leader, of a great founder is the degree to which you can see the matrix, the degree to which you can recognize patterns. And when you see the patterns, the patterns that are overperforming, that's where you want to double down. And then where you see the patterns where things are underperforming, that's when you want to cut and or make changes quickly. 1.7 times your close rate. So again, mathematically, what do we mean here? So let's say your close rate is 20%. You have 5 leads that come in and 1 generally will translate to a sale. Well, we'd like to get that, multiply that by 1.7, go from 20% to 34%, right? So for example, if it's 6 leads coming in, 2 are translating to a sale. Now, to go from 20% to 34%, is that within the realm of reason? Absolutely. Literally, all we're talking about doing is going from not that great close rates up to where you should be if you want to play, at an elite level. But how do we do that? Well, first off, we have to ask ourselves, well, what's hurting your close rate? And it's typically not the price, it's the uncertainty. It's people asking, is this really worth it? Is now the right time? Is this the right solution? And you want to make the decision feel obvious by understanding these are the questions that are on their mind. But to answer the right questions, you need to be really good at listening and follow my 70-30 rule with regard to that. So 70% of the time, the prospect should be speaking, 30% of the time, you speaking. Let them speak, ask the right questions, dig deeper. Often, they will reveal with the things they say the best way to close the deal. And 3 questions your sales conversations absolutely must answer include, why do anything? So what's the cost of not taking action? for example. Why now? What happens if they delay their decision? And why you? What makes your solution the best fit? And when you're handling objections, don't take an objection as a sign of, so an amateur sales person trying to make a sale, an amateur in that regard, will just get so disheartened from the objection and just shut off. But if they weren't interested at all, they would just shut down completely. And so when they give you an objection, this is an opportunity for you to turn that into a sale. So try questions that go with them rather than against them. So tell me more about that. What's holding you back from moving forward? Can I share how our other clients have handled that? So you want to shift, as I wrote here, from resistance to building trust. And when it comes to increasing that win rate, the fortune is in the follow-up. Follow-ups are where most deals are lost. Now, this is some data from the National Sales Executive Association, and it's shocking. So 2% of sales happen on the first contact. 80% of sales happen on the 5th to 12th contact. I'm not talking about if you're selling something that's like $50 or something like that. I'm talking about more like, B2B sales. But 48% of reps never follow up, and only 10% follow up more than 3 times. Well, hang on, we need to get to the 5th time before 80% of the sales happen. Follow-up does not equal just checking in. How many of you get these? I get them like every single day. It's like I immediately delete them. All these BS emails, just checking in, just bumping this up to the top of your inbox, right? Boring. So don't just say, just circling back, I wanted to follow up on my last email. Instead, in every single follow-up, try to add value, add insight, share a win, ask a smart question, help move the decision forward. And you do that in a multi-touch way. So email, phone, LinkedIn, video message, referral/intros. You want to aim for 5+ touches over 2 to 3 weeks. Remember the data I just showed you, right? The majority of the transactions are closing between the 5th to 12th contact, 80%. So if we're smart, we design a multi-touch sequence over a 2 to 3 week period that gets us 5+ touches, that gets us into that 80% closed territory, adding value with each touch. And you do that with lightweight CTAs as well. Would it be helpful if I sent a comparison? Would you like to see how we solve this for another client? Would it help if I presented a quick roadmap? When you're putting questions like these in your follow-ups, literally have it as the last thing. This is a slight little detail, but if you have a question like this, would it help if I presented a quick roadmap, for example? And then you do another little paragraph where you're making a statement that's less powerful than ending the email with the question, which is more likely to prompt a response. So here's a quick exercise. Audit your follow-up flow. So look at 3 recent deals that didn't close and ask yourself, how many times did we follow up? Do you even know? Right? Did each touch add new value? Do you know? Or are people on your team, or are you, God forbid, doing stuff like just checking in? Were we clear on the next step? And design your default follow-up sequence. Make sure it lands in a multi-touch way, at least with 5 contacts or more, because that's where 80% of the closing happens. So again, we're going through the 3-1-7-2 recipe to 10x your growth, 3 times your leads, 1.7 times your close rate, and now you want to 2x your pricing or your ACV, average contract value, however you generally think about things. So how do we do that? Well, one, we need to price for ROI, not affordability. So remember, customers aren't buying your product or your service. That is not what they're buying. Nobody on the planet buys anything in that way. They're buying a result, a transformation. And you want to anchor your pricing to whatever that is. Is it time saved? Is it revenue generated? Is it risk reduced? Because the bigger the outcome, the smaller the price feels. And another thing that you can do to help increase ACV is consider multiple tiers. This makes you transition from it's a yes versus a no to a yes versus a yes. So for example, entry is baseline results, core, most value, best ROI, premium. That's where you get speed, service, exclusivity. This actually helps buyers choose and is proven to raise your average contract value. Why? Why does this strategy work? So number one, anchoring psychology. When customers see a premium price first, the mid-tier looks like a deal. Two, when there's only one price, there's no comparison, more resistance. Choice without overwhelm. One option is, do I want this? Three options, which one fits me best? Buyer segmentation. Different customers will value different things, right? So we want to monetize across all segments. And then last but not least, premium buyers will self-select. A percent of buyers, they want to pay more. They want the white glove service. And so don't leave that money on the table. So how can you adapt the three tiers to your business? This works for virtually all types of businesses, by the way. And if you don't have fixed packages and every deal is bespoke, then you could still use, good, better, best positioning in your proposals. But a quick example would be simply this, have a base level. It's the core deliverables, minimal support, a growth level, additional value, higher impact, faster delivery, and say a partner level, full service, strategic advisory, training and support, highest ROI. This might not apply in this exact context to every single business, but I think you get what I'm saying in terms of expanding how you are currently structuring and thinking through things. So a quick reflection for you is simply, is your pricing building trust or eroding it? So look at your current pricing model. Is it aligned to the value you deliver, to the impact you create? Is it simple to explain? Can buyers see the ROI immediately? Do you discount too quickly or too often? That's not great. And if you find yourself negotiating the price too often, you haven't sold the outcome clearly enough. Now, I will stop the share here actually, let me take you through three more things very, very quickly. Sorry. Did we share, I can't see the chat, but could we share the link so that people can grab the slides for this if we haven't yet already? So I sent that to Megan and okay, great. So again, this is rapid fire. So just register on that page. You'll get the slides. You're also going to get a ton of other stuff, ongoing, training and advice especially if you're a business owner, that will help you think holistically about your business and help you scale it and yourself to a higher level. And make sure you go through this in your team. Now, as I mentioned, very, very quickly, just to wrap up, this is just a tiny taster of the way I think about things in relation to the Founder and CEO Accelerator, where we deliver three outcomes through coaching, curriculum, and community. We help you do these three things: scale your company, lead at a world-class level, and operate at your full potential. And if you guys wouldn't mind sharing the link to the accelerator in the chat, that would be great. That's the other one I shared. You'll see a link there to check it all out. It's a very holistic program. I won't go through incredible detail here, but we help you scale the company. So today I just touched very briefly on accelerating your sales growth. We had hardly, any time, right? And we go through so much more than that. How do you lead at a world-class level? How do you operate at your full potential? And our next cohort kicks off on January 21st. And speaking of sales, people who have participated in our program, what have they achieved? Tons of different companies, industries, sizes, but 20% sales growth as a result of attending the program, going from 5 million to 6 million. Wolfgang added 10 million in top line to his 40 million a year company. Holly 2xing sales every month. Tons more on the site. I won't go through these in detail, but I hope you found that useful, and I will stop the share.
Amazing. I think if I was to pick one thing that you said that I think that a lot of people don't think about is the fact that if you find yourself negotiating your price, you haven't anchored and created a good enough offer. And I think a lot of founders and CEOs find themselves continuously going back and negotiating price with people. So my first question would be, in a few minutes, how would you just give people a stronger frame for thinking about anchoring a price so they don't have to negotiate as much?
Yeah. So the first thing is it was actually touched on in one of the slides, but just to kind of touch on that once more and go a little bit deeper. Nobody is buying your product or service. That is never what somebody's buying. They are always buying a result. They are always buying a transformation. by definition, a result has an X to Y within it. Client is here or customer is here, use product slash service, they get there, right? That X to Y encoded within that journey, or the thing that yeah, that is what you should be pricing against, whether that's time saved or revenue generated for them or increased productivity, that creates value for them. And so that impact, quantifying that impact from the client's point of view, and then pricing against that. Typically, what that does is that it makes you laugh because then you think, oh my gosh, what I'm charging is absolutely peanuts compared to what they're getting.
Yeah.
Um, another thing, Chris, too, is this kind of illustrates it a little bit. This won't apply to everyone, but it's still useful for illustrative purposes. Uh, so coaches get this wrong all the time. Um, so a coach will say something like, "Yeah, I charge X per session." It's like, "Oh my God, what the hell are you doing?" Like you've just minimized everything that you've done. You've just reduced yourself to an hourly like employee or something. First off, nobody pays for hours. If you're a founder or a CEO, and let's say somebody's doing a shit job on your team and they've been doing a shit job for a long time and you've had enough and they need to go. And then they come back to you and you go, "What are you talking about? Like, how have you fired me? I've been working 50 hours a week." Yeah, like if they said that, you'd be like, "What are you talking about? It has nothing to do with the hours." It's because of the impact that they've created or not created. Like that's what you're paying for. So if as a founder, CEO, as a business owner, anybody who's building a team, if we only actually pay for impact ourselves, then why on earth would we price ourselves in a way that communicates otherwise? Right. So yeah, so that's just like a little side note, but anybody like in a service industry, never quote an hourly rate for anything because nobody on the planet is paying for your hours. They're paying for your impact. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Eric for joining us today. Eric, for me, still remains like my greatest motivational factor in my life. And I think that comes through having an amazing friendship as well as having amazing accountability. Like, I actually want the best in the world in every situation physically possible for Eric. That remains true. At the same time, him performing at the rate that he does, the success that he has, I find motivational. And so I would say to people, and I say it in the Creator Accelerator a lot, I say it in my content a lot, you've got to find yourself an Eric. And what was funny is I was in Boise last year with Nathan Barry, and I told him that story, or at least I told that on the stage in the keynote. And afterwards, Nathan Barry was like, "Yeah, my Eric is James Clear." I was like, "James Clear?" I was like, what do you mean? Your Eric is James Clear?" And what was funny is afterwards, a lot of people came up to us and they were like, "Well, how do you get, Eric and James Clear to be your, ride or die?" And the point is, Eric and I have built our businesses and this like meteoric success that we've had over the last couple of years together. And so like we partnered up. Like nowadays, truth be told, like if I was just starting and he is where he is, it'd be very hard for us to become as close and as tight as we are in retrospect. And same with James Clear and Nathan Barry. When Nathan Barry and James Clear became friends, James Clear hadn't released Atomic Habits, and Nathan Barry hadn't built a business that makes 50 million a year. And so they did it together. So same with Sahil, they're all good friends with Sahil. And so you've got to create your accountability and best friends and ride or dies. That's the reality of it.
100%. And I can like echo everything that you just said because really I mean, we said early on, right, that we felt that there was this 1+1 = 3 effect. And so you have to find your 1+1 = 3. That support and the accountability that you get from it is just rocket fuel, for your growth. I know we're wrapping up, but uh, if you're thinking about building a personal brand and if it's important to you, remember that 3x your lead rate that I was talking about. There literally isn't a better person on the planet than Chris. Like I vouch for him 1,000%. So yeah, take the opportunity if you can. while it's still available. So, but yeah, thanks for
Thanks
having me,
very
Chris.
much. Thanks very much, Eric. Take it easy, dude. Speak to you
Okay,
later.
thanks. See you. Bye-bye.
Wow. I do want people, if you're going to make a note on a piece of paper about that talk, I do want you to focus on that if you find yourself negotiating your product and your price the entire time, then you haven't displayed the value of your product in the warm-up, because that talk from Eric really symbolizes that for me, and that's what he helped me do. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are so lucky to have my friend. I don't even know how we're friends. I think I had you on my podcast, and you were just the nicest person in the world, and you also happen to be one of the most impressive people in the world. And I think, well, I think I'm able to say we became mates because you're just very transparent, very honest. There's no bravado with you. You're just straight talking. You've built an incredible business, and you are an incredible person. So I'm so pleased to have Sarah Davies on today, who most people will know as being a dragon, Dragon's Den. But I would love to just ask you a variety of questions. I'd love you to introduce yourself, but I'd love to ask you a variety of questions about how you think about business and lead generation, and hopefully add some value to our audience today.
I will do anything you want me to do just because you ask me, and it is not a problem. And just thinking about that, I, I I am a firm believer, and I subscribe to the theory that you are a product of the people you surround yourself with. And don't get me wrong, we live at opposite ends of the country, and other than when I came down to be on your podcast, we've never been in the same room together. But there was something about when we spent time together that day, and I came away from that conversation thinking, I need to have that guy in my life a little bit more. And so I found myself at the end of it being like, I mean, quite forward, but do you want to take my number? Do you want to keep in touch? Do you know, it's not like we speak every day, but that whole theory of you are a product of the people you surround yourself with, that's also the people that you follow on social media and the noise that you're seeing when you do that. And you are one of them people that I've started following on social, and I just find it really inspirational the way I watch you live your life. So I then made you one of my favorite people so that I would always see the stuff that you post, because I'm like, I need this in my life more so that it keeps motivating me. And I tell people about this all the time, be very selective in who you let into your life, who you choose to spend your time with. And when Chris told me about this event he was running, I said, no problem. I will be there. Tell me when, what time, how long for, what you want, and you're going to have as much brain power as you need. And yeah, ask me anything. I am happy to share anything. I think for anyone who maybe doesn't know my background, I started my business Crafters Companion 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, when I was still at university, and I ran it as like a side hustle in my university bedroom. And by the time I graduated, kind of 6, 7 months in, my business was turning over more than my mum and dad's family business, which had been my plan after I finished university, was to come take over the family business. I had a business kind of with 500,000 turnover, my first couple of staff, came back home and was like, right, better start and learn how to run a business because I guess this is what I'm doing now. And it just went from strength to strength. And I built that business. I think in its peak we were doing close to 40 million. I had about 250 staff globally, offices around the UK and over in Europe. We had most of our business was in the US. And then I remember I got invited to join the panel of Dragon's Den. And that was 7 years ago now. And I am probably a little bit unlike any of the other dragons they've had in the past. They're not used to somebody with so much empathy and warmth, and who maybe wears their heart on the sleeve quite as much as I do. And I remember when I went through the interview process, they were like, "We could do with you being a little bit more dragony." And I'm like, well, this is who I am. And either this is right for the job or it's not. So either take me as I am or I'm not the right person for you. And that was 7 years ago. So yes, it's been quite the roller coaster.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're all incredibly privileged to have you here. So we have 3 streams. So we have 3.4 thousand people live right this second, which is pretty cool that we've had thousands of people live for the last 4 hours. So in keeping with the event, I want to ask first and foremost, like, how do you think about lead generation and driving attention to your business when you are a product-based founder? Because a lot of the people we've talked to today have been services-based. So how do you think about it as a product-based founder? How does that work for you?
Okay, so I was a product-based founder. My first product was called the Enveloper, and it was about making handmade envelopes. So people who were into making handmade cards we made the envelopes. Now, if you didn't know that I went on to make millions and became a dragon, a lot of people at that point roll their eyes and switch off because they think card making, that's a pretty niche industry. Who wants to make their own envelopes? I remember seeing them on Gogglebox one day and the guy went, "Isn't that the lass who made millions out of making envelopes?" And I'm like, "Hell yes, mate. Listen up." So it's not about, you don't have to have had the most groundbreaking idea in the world. You don't have to, you need to know how to be relevant to your audience and how to really hit the niche. And what I would say is it's not about the hard sell. It's about adding value. So if you think about it in terms of crafting, my customers, they didn't need hard selling. They needed to be inspired. They wanted the education. They wanted to learn how to make the most beautiful envelopes, and they needed the storytelling. So I would always, be showing the product in action. I would be demonstrating what it does, how it might make someone's life easier, or show them how it might make their life better. So if I say to you, you've just made a handmade card. We've got a pack of envelopes. It's 15p if you want to buy an envelope, or you can buy my enveloper for 14.99 and you can prattle on and make your own envelope. You do that, nobody ever wants to do that, right? Whereas actually, when you start and show and I say, "Oh, look at this beautiful handmade card I've got," you can't tell me you're going to put that in a plain envelope. You wouldn't give somebody a birthday present wrapped in newspaper, no. And as soon as you story tell, and as soon as you can add value to that person's life by showing them that whatever it is they're going to do anyway, they can do it better with your product. Their life's going to be easier, or the experience is going to be elevated, then people become loads more interested. So you've always got to think about what value are you adding to them, not how do I sell them my product? Because if you come at everything from the point of view of, "Oh, well, all I'm doing is generating leads, so I'm just going to sell them my product," they'll switch off because you're just white noise. You have to get them interested so that they let you into their life. Once you're in their life, then, as I always say, you can go for the jugular a bit.
I love that. So it's selling the value, which is a theme we've had a lot today, is to sell the value of the product. So if you were to look back, like you say, you've had the most incredible career, globally famous, built an amazing business. If you were to go back and give yourself advice as a youngster, maybe coming out of university or those first few years in business, what would the advice be? Like, could you give yourself advice on growing a personal brand? Was that something you were even thinking about at the time? Or what would the core bit of advice you'd give yourself?
Yeah, I think don't pigeonhole yourself and don't limit yourself. Okay. So you mentioned then about America. I launched in America within a couple of weeks, or certainly within a couple of months after launching in the UK. And everybody who knew I was starting the business, bear in mind it was my side hustle. I was in my last year at university as well. Was like, "Well, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't be doing this. You should focus on your core market. Think about that later. Don't be worrying about America now." And that wasn't. I'm an excitable person, and if I'm doing something, I'm starting it yesterday. And so, no, I wasn't going to hold myself back on not do something because other people said that wasn't appropriate. Go out and be completely authentic. Be authentically you, consistently authentically you, relatable and always recognizable. And I think the other thing kind of tied in with that is your reputation is everything. Absolutely everything. Every person you come into contact is forming an opinion of you at every second of every day. And now I feel that even more acutely being a recognizable face than I did before. But it was never a difficult step for me because I've been like that for years. So, if I'm at a trade show and I would have a man in a suit come up to me who was clearly some important bigwig from a big multinational chain, or I'd get an older lady who was more casually dressed, who was clearly there as a professional crafter. I would make sure I gave each person the same energy and attention, and I wouldn't prejudge based on that because my reputation, she is more likely to remember my reputation and talk about me in the industry than he ever will be. Just
Mm.
because he might be more valuable to me in a business capacity doesn't mean I should ever compromise my relationship. So that was always something I held really, really dear.
I have to say, the when we did our podcast together and we posted it online, I don't think I've ever seen the pouring out of positivity for anyone I had on the podcast afterwards or before. And so whatever you have done with crafting your personal brand and your image, I think it's just you being authentically kind and honest and transparent and value additive. And so for all founders, I think that in itself is a crazy lesson. Like if you go back and look at those episodes I did over that period of time, you got a lot of positivity about a lot of guests, but yours was like an outpouring. And so I think that's a great lesson for everyone, that your reputation stays with you forever. It's the one thing you can't get away from.
And the thing is, it just it's so hard work being anything other than authentically yourself. And one of the things I pride myself on is if you're watching me on this video today, or you watch me host the quiz show that I'm doing for ITV at the moment, or you bump into me at Tesco at 11 o'clock at night doing some emergency shopping, right? You will get the same version of me. Granted, I might not have as much makeup on and you might not recognize me, but you will get exactly the same version of me. And I would stop and chat and I think trying to be somebody else, and I see it with a lot of high profile people, they turn something on and I'm very observant and I notice that behind the scenes and then all of a sudden I question and I think, oh, so actually I'm not getting the real you. And I don't know, I want to be around a different version of you. And that's why they say never meet your heroes or whatever. And so it's always stuck with me. And it comes right back to that first time when I did my interview for Dragon's Den and they told me if I wanted to get the job, I needed to be a bit more dragony. And I made this decision of no, I'm going to be authentically me and I need to make peace with if authentically me isn't good enough for this. I might have just missed the biggest opportunity of my life. That I could have been fake me and landed, but I need to be okay with that fact. And I think then you can see it through.
So for those people on the call or those who watch afterwards that are selling products, you talked about value, but I suppose tactically, when you think back to how you got your first customers, what sort of tactics were you employing at the time? And I suppose when you think about 2026, like how would you think about launching a product business now?
Okay, so just because it's a product business, and actually product businesses are what I know better than service business, it's all about cutting through all the rest of the noise and making meaningful content that people want to engage with. So for us in crafting, it's really simple. Okay, we're a content engine in our business. I ended up building two world class studios in our head offices 5 or 6 years ago, and we output live content hours and hours every day of crafting, and people all over the world watch this. Okay, and our main motivation in doing that is to deliver content that consumer loves. She wants to be a part of our community. She wants to learn how to be able to craft the way that we craft. She wants to feel special and important to us. She wants the behind the scenes. She wants the little tips and tricks, okay? And then the byproduct of that is we get her so excited about being part of our community, part of our business and what we do. She wants to be in there even further, so she chooses to spend her money with us, right? If I just turn up and go, whoa, I'm selling you this, I need you to buy it, she doesn't want to know that. She doesn't want to be sold to. And I say she because 99.9% of our customers are women. But it's the same principle, whatever industry you're into, okay? People don't want to be sold to. They want to belong to a community. They want to be part of this. It's like the Peloton theory. You look at the way Peloton, and I've studied extensively the way Peloton built their business. And it's, yes, they're selling product, they make money selling products. But if you really have the drive to want to make people's lives better and you can give them meaningful value add content to their life that they then choose to engage with, the byproduct of that is eventually, if you're doing your customer journey well enough, they will convert to sales. But if you set out focusing on the sales, you'll never ever gain their attention in the way that you need it to have a meaningful relationship and be able to sell.
And I suppose thinking 2026, there's so many different channels. I always find that as a business owner, it's confusing which thing you pursue. There's so many different social media channels, there's so many different ways of selling. Obviously, I think you're famous in that one, you're famous for your TV, but you were also very good at selling on TV. And so I suppose, like, how does that come about? How do you get yourself into the position where that is the case? And how do you go about generating real revenue from that channel? And I suppose for the founders listening, like how can they go about pursuing that as a strategy?
Yeah. So I always say this when I'm in the den as well. The most important skill I believe you need to have as an entrepreneur is the ability to sell. And if you are not confident in that, and if it's not your strength, work on it. It's not acceptable to just say, oh, it's not really my thing. I'm going to leave that to somebody else. You need to work on it because there is nobody is as authentic of a storyteller as the one who founded the business. Okay. Now, I think the reason I've become so good at it over the years is I've done over 20 years now in TV shopping. And I guess what we see now as TikTok shop is what I was seeing 20 years ago on QVC, right? And I am hungry for knowledge, hungry all the time. So I had to go when we first launched the product. I pitched to the buyers at the shopping channel. It was a great way to reach hundreds of thousands of customers in one fell swoop. And then I had no choice other than to go and present the product on air because there was only me in the business. So I had to learn how to do it quickly. And all the nerves I had, don't get me wrong, I was vomiting in the bin in the green room before I went on air the first time. So it's not like I wasn't born this way. I had to make myself this way, okay? But in doing that, I learned how to get better. And what I do is, even now, 20 years in, I know, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet to go around, but I'm going to blow my own goddamn trumpet here. There is nobody who can sell craft on telly like I can. There is nobody who can get the dollars per minute sales on the biggest shopping channels in the world. Nobody can touch me in my industry. I'm just like that. That's what I do. I'm like the money maker when it comes to this. But still, every time that I go on, I am striving to get better. I still go on courses, I still send myself on training, and what I do is I study the other people. So when I first started out, I used to watch hours and hours and hours of shop and telly, and I used to study the ones that were making me want to buy that product more. And then I was psychoanalyzing what is it they're doing to make me want to buy that product. Then, as I got a little bit further on, I started going on training courses with the shopping channel people to see how they do shopping telly. And I remember at one point I was presenting shopping telly in Germany every few weeks, and I don't speak a word of German. They used to have somebody live lip sync me from a little sound booth while I was over there. And what I realized was, I learned about what's called Meridian's theory, where only 7% of what somebody hears are the physical words that you say. 53% body language, 30 odd percent intonation. So there's a bit of a mix of all. And I'm thinking, right, so they can't hear me. They can't hear my voice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overdo all of my gesticulation, my body language, so that you can feel that positive energy oozing out of your screen, even if you can't hear my voice and you're hearing somebody else's voice. And then I'm going to make sure I drag that little old lady that's sitting in the sound booth, who I'm paying, £1,000 an hour to be able to translate my voice. I want to inject my energy into her because I'm going to be so full of energy. And I think it was doing that TV in Germany that gave me the skills to be able to amplify my energy wherever I go. So whenever I'm on a talk like this, I'm not making a conscious effort to wave my hands about and to be in and out and to lift my voice. I've just done so many years of this that becomes my natural state. And that energy becomes what's infectious and people buy into. So I'm going to tell you now, if you want to get good at selling, whether that's on TikTok shop, whether that's you've got a stall in the local market, whether that's however you are selling, if you are face to face selling with people, go and watch QVC. Go and watch QVC. Don't just watch it, study it. Whenever you sit and have that on in the background, and then when you find, because we will convince you that you need to buy something there, when you find you made that purchase, I want you to go and psychoanalyze what is it she or he said that made me cave and purchase now. And that's what you then start working on in your own personal self-development.
It's actually an amazing point, everyone. What Sarah's just said is that a lot of people would assume that this was your natural skill day one. And as a result, they kind of discount their own ability to get to the level that you're at. And I saw a great clip of Ed Sheeran the other day talking about how everyone's like, yeah, but he has the best voice in the world. And he plays him singing the first time he was recorded singing, and it is appalling. And so the point is that in business and in growing our different businesses, like you have to be the front nowadays to cut through the noise. You have to be, and so you have to teach yourself. And so you've just heard it there live from the best TV seller in the world that Sarah taught herself that skill set, which I think is means it's available for everyone to pursue that. It's
And I'm
available.
still learning it. I think the other thing is growth mindset. I already know that there is nobody in my industry can touch me, but you don't rest on your laurels. I'm still pushing myself to get better. I'm still seeing how can I constantly strive to become better. And that as soon as you think you know everything, you're absolutely done for. You've got to constantly be pushing yourself. Have that open growth mindset because every day is a school day. And I can tell you now, I'm a better entrepreneur now than I was this time last year. Even
Mm.
though, and every time I can see that personal growth and development I'm going through.
And so I suppose to the founder thinking about where to spend their time in, the next year, like where in their marketing should they spend their 30 minutes, an hour, etc. I always would say, like, I think a huge part of the founder's job in general is going to be marketing and sales. And so I think that you want to find, and you said this on the podcast, you want to find someone, yours happens to be your husband, who is amazing at the other side of the business, which I think is critical. But if you had 30 minutes a day for marketing, where would you spend it nowadays?
Okay, so focus on the stuff that you're really, really good at. Okay, because that's where you're going to add the most amount of value, and it'll be the stuff that you're passionate about, and where you can add the value. I know, like you said, I mean, my husband's the accountant. He does all of the numbers, the logistics, the stuff that I find really dull and boring. Right? I'm your pitch woman, so I spend my time. That's where I would put my time. Now, if we're talking specifically marketing, okay. I I would say this, but I think social media is paramount, okay? But make sure you understand what you are doing on social media because it's not good enough to just say, I have half an hour, so I'm going to spend half an hour a day on social media. What are you going to do in that half an hour? Because I know the way that algorithm's designed, I open up my Instagram with every intention of making a post and posting the picture and adding the text that goes with it. And next thing I know, 20 minutes has gone and I still haven't got off my Explore feed, right? Because that's how the algorithm's designed, right? So you have to have the discipline to move beyond that. You have to say, okay, in half an hour, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my post. I'm going to go back on my last 5 posts. I'm going to add so much engagement. I'm going to update my stories. I'm going to do the post here. I'm going to post it across multiple platforms. Or however you plan it, but plan what you're going to do in that time. Just saying I'm going on social media for half an hour isn't going to do it because you'll fritter your time away and you'll waste it, especially in an area that's designed to pull your attention away from work and what you're doing. So whether you want to call them official KPIs or whether you just want to have a plan of what you're doing and stick to that plan religiously every day. Showing up as your authentic self every single day consistently for half an hour will have an enormous impact. And I bet you probably think you're doing that at the moment, but if you sit and analyze the half an hour that you spent on social media yesterday, did you really spend it as well as you should have spent it, or have you wasted some of it?
Completely agree. And I always think for CEOs, for founders, even in the early stage of your business, you need to identify your impact. And so I've been working on social media for a long time, but I actually haven't done much of the posting myself for a long time. And that's because I identified that as time consuming, but not hugely valuable. And so I do a lot of the thinking behind my brand, and then I outsource the tasks. I think for founders and entrepreneurs, the thinking as to where your leads are coming from is where you want to spend most of your time. I think the other thing you've been amazing at is building a community around your business. And I think that's quite rare. People talk about community so much, but the Crafter Companion community has been amazing. So how have you how did you build that to begin with, and how have you sort of maintained such a huge following and such a huge community of people? Like what do you do to engage your community?
So our community in Crafters Companion is hands down the number one most valuable thing that we have. It's the biggest tactic that's driven sales. It's what set us aside from our competitors. And I remember when doing like Facebook and Instagram lives and that became really big 5 or 6 years ago, every man and his dog in our industry turned their garage into a studio and thought they could start, broadcasting on Facebook. And people couldn't understand why we would do it and have 600 viewers. Whereas even HSN, our biggest customer globally over in the US that had like 2 million followers on Facebook, they would get 50 people watching a live. Yet I would have 600 when we only had 30,000 followers, right? And I think you've got to understand when you're building a community, it's quality over quantity. Stop getting obsessed with how big the number is and get obsessed with how valuable those customers are and how can you really add value into their life. So one of the things that I found made a real difference, first of all, we understood where our customers were. So for Crafters Companion, our core customers, Facebook, right?
Mm.
Yes, TikTok was up and coming. Yes, some of them had Instagram, but actually our biggest spenders, they were all still Facebook was their platform. So we put all of our energy and focus into Facebook because on Facebook we could easily build and navigate communities. And what we learned with the crafters is if somebody's part of a community, they will join the community at first and not have the confidence to chat or whatever, but they're just observing. We need to draw out and encourage them to chat with each other and to start posting pictures. The massive win for us is when someone buys one of our products and then makes a card with it and posts the picture of that card in the community. Because what happens is they're such lovely people, crafters. That's why I wanted to build a business in the industry when I started to get to know them, that you post a picture of your card in that group and hundreds of people will like it and will say, "Hey, Dorothy, that's beautiful. What a gorgeous card you've made." Because they want to boost they take pleasure from boosting other people up in that community, right? And I remember crafters, you would never ever see them post pictures of their cards on their own pages. They wouldn't have the confidence to do that, where they might have a couple of hundred friends, but those friends might be people who aren't interested in the same hobby that they are, might think it's a little bit naff that they make their own cards, a bit cheap. You should buy your cards instead of making them. Whereas when they go where their tribe is and the other people who love the hobby like they do in this community, they feel free to be themselves. And then what I learned was the key to unlocking those communities in a big way is when I go and engage with that community. So as soon as I write on that post, Dorothy, that card's lovely. I bet your grandson's going to love it. You know, when you made a card for grandson's birthday, all of a sudden, I've just made Dorothy's day. I've probably made Dorothy's year, right? And so what does that effect have? Now, Dorothy wants to post all the pictures of what she makes. Also, Dorothy wants to tell all of her friends, look, Sarah Davies liked my card and said it was going to be lovely. And then the hundreds of other people who've seen that think, I'm going to post pictures of my cards because Sarah Davies might like my cards, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it has the impact of fueling that community and driving the conversation to another level. So what you've got to do is within a community, you aren't the one making the post, driving the post. You're the one commenting and driving the engagement because when you can mobilize that community to then become essentially what you do is you turn your followers into raving fans. That's the big win. I read a really brilliant book years and years ago called Raving Fans. And it was about converting followers into raving fans, and communities is how you do that. So don't fixate on how many people. I remember our core Crafters Companion community we only had 20,000 members in it, which doesn't seem like an inexorbitant amount of people, but they were so engaged. And then they were the people who were spending thousands with us. I would rather have that community of 20,000 people doing that than having 200,000 people who weren't as engaged.
And so, by the way, everyone, what was just said is like the hack to all business. If you can build a community that loves the product, loves each other, gets value from it, you will get so much back in return for your business. So my last question for you, with the time that I have, is as a young entrepreneur, how can you think about trying to get yourself on TV? Because you are the master. Like, how does that work? You know, like how do you position yourself in a way? How do you like how does that happen?
Do you know what? Nobody from TV is ever going to ring up and go, "Do you want to come on telly?" Right? It's not going to happen. And I think the big thing for me, the big learning, people always ask me, how did you get to be on Dragon's Den? Now, believe it or not, I'm working from home today, and Duncan Bannatyne used to live 4 doors down from me, right? Just as luck would have it, right? And I can remember when we moved in and I found out that Duncan lived 4 doors down. I remember thinking, oh, I might bump into him one day when we're putting the bins out or something. And then I might get chatting to him. And then he might say to the producers, "There's a brilliant entrepreneur lives on my street. She might be a brilliant dragon." Like, and so in my head, I was hoping all these things would happen. And I'd thought that for several years whilst living 4 doors down from him, right? And one day my friend was round and we're chatting about it and he said, "I think you'd be brilliant on Dragon's Den, you know." And I said, do you know what? I think I would too. Like, I just think it plays really well to my strengths and I'd love it. And I think if I'd love it, it would probably ooze out, as it does, oozes out of my every pore. And so he said, all right, so, well, why don't you ring them and see if they want, what's the process for applying? And I was like, don't be silly. I'm fat. Like, I was like, they're all loads older than me for a start, so I'm too young to be on Dragon's Den. And you don't just ring the BBC and ask if you can be a dragon. And he challenged me and he was like, well, why not? Why can you not do that? And so you bugger, the next day, that was a Sunday night, we were having the chat or whatever. Monday morning, he rang up the BBC and he went through the process as though he was applying to be a contestant on the show. Got through to a research and said, I don't want to be on the show. I'm ringing to tell you about my friend. She'd be absolutely awesome. And he did a massive sell job on us. And then he rang us back and he went, you're not going to believe it. The researcher's ringing you this afternoon. And all I need is a tiny little wedge of a door opening. If somebody can open that door for us, I can bulldoze my way through it. So he opened that door, and then it was 6 months of interviews and screen tests and all of this lot. But I was determined and fixated on it. And that's what I do. I sell. So whether it's selling myself or whatever it is. And so all I think is, I would never have done that. He needed to give me that push. Maybe he's hearing this today as you push. And it might not be about, going on the BBC. It might be about ringing QVC to get a slot on QVC. It might be about, doing your first TikTok live. But if you just sit there, the opportunity is never ever going to come to you. You've got to go to the opportunity. There's only you in control of your destiny can make shit happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was incredible. Thank you. I was so motivated at the end of that. I just
Go and
want to
make
go
it
and get.
happen, Chris. No one's going to do it for you. Go and do it.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you very much for sharing with us. It's been awesome. And I'll message you later. Thank you very much.
Right. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your session.
Take it easy. Right, ladies and gents, we are closing on Q&A, where I will answer as many technical, as many challenging questions as I possibly can. Try and always give me as much context as possible, and I will try and work with you to come up with a solution for your business problem or your personal brand problem. And I think it's important, right? If you ever see me answering questions, I try not to do like super quick answers. And especially in the TCA, I do really in-depth answers as to problem solving. Because I've been tactically in businesses for a long time, I will often know the lever you need to push, or the area you need to focus on, or the thing that you need to do less of to improve your business. And so just before we have Dr. Caroline Frost on, who's going to tell us a little bit about her experience, I just wanted to do a recap. We have 2 seats left on the discount. And so the TCA starts on Monday. I put my all, my absolute everything into helping people achieve their wildest dreams in terms of creating leverage for themselves, in terms of creating outcome. It's 10 to 12 weeks long. We work incredibly hard together to achieve our goals. So if you want to sign up to the Creator Accelerator, I cannot wait to work with you. We will do everything from establishing a brand, building an audience, and then turning that audience and attention into revenue. And like Nathan Barry said, I always think that's kind of a more advanced step, but turning attention into equity is a very, very like considered and worked out process. People have been doing that for years and years and years. You take the attention, you shift it into a business, and you build real equity. And Nathan Barry, for 35 years old, has been doing that now for 10 to 15 years, and his business is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he has done that through content into his platform kit. So if you want to sign up, please do. And now I'm going to invite Dr. Caroline up just for a few minutes to tell us about her experience. Okay, I'm just going to answer a few questions before. So let me go to some audience questions. So the first question, I think this is a fair question. Like, is the Creator Accelerator for people who have a business or a startup, or is it okay to just use it for building a personal brand? I would say, honestly, that if you're like day one, you don't have a monetization stream and you don't have a business, I would say, I actually don't think we're the place. Like, I think there's so much free content, so much free resources out there. There's people who do much less intense programming than we do. And so I would say, like, go and do some learning. We will do another one at some point when we have time in the future. But like, if you have a business, if you have a personal brand and you want to take it to the next level, that's kind of where we come in. We're about completely challenging your assumptions of what is possible and taking you to the next level. Jeff says, what is a realistic commitment per week to actually see results in the program? Okay, I've got to be straight with you about this, right? When I went all in on personal brand, I went all in. You know, I was doing like probably 10 hours a week on top of being a CEO of a large company at the time. And that's why my brand exploded. If you're thinking that you could do this in a couple of hours a week, that's unrealistic because you're thinking about achieving an outsized opportunity for you and your business by working a small amount. Those two things do not go together. And so if you want the gold at the end of the rainbow, if you want the incredible business, if you want to build the software company, if you want to have, you know, 100,000 followers, 1 million followers, if you want to get onto TV, like these things do not happen easily. You are in a competitive world, in a competitive space. Everyone is competing for the same stuff. And so you have to understand that none of this comes easy. So time commitment, I would say, I don't even think of it like that. I think of it about being all in, but at least 5 hours a week. At least 5 hours a week. I need you to have. Realistically, I'm going to say 7. And that's what you need to have for 10 to 12 weeks. And then from that point onwards, you will know the system. You will know the how to scale things, how to repeat things, how to make it systemized and so forth. I have a question from Sarah Greaves. I've invested in courses before and I've never finished them. What makes TCA worth the money? So we don't release the content on day one. Every week we release new content and every week we ensure that the content is embedded. And that I think is a massive difference. It's like, it is staged learning. So like week 1, people are like, tell me the hacks, tell me the tricks, tell me all this stuff. And it's like, guys, you need to learn the fundamentals of good writing first. You need to learn the fundamentals of how to create a great hook first. And then you need to think how I can do this at scale systematically over time. Like I say in my like 3 laws of leverage, right? This thing is something you will do for a very long time. You will consistently be creating content moving forwards. I mean, look at Daniel Priestley as a good example. He's been creating content for 20 years. He owns many businesses. He has huge leverage. He's invited on the biggest podcasts in the world. But like, if he started today, what could he achieve in 6 months? It would be small in comparison, but without that first 6 months, you're going nowhere. Baker says, how does this apply to more conservative industries or only pure SaaS? How does lead generation work for agri-tech, water tech, and B2B? Well, the reality is that sort of the phrase riches is in the niches, right? So you can build an incredible business in a niche because your niche is still going to have a big audience and you need to become the voice in that space. And that, again, won't happen overnight, but can you generate an audience of 10,000 people in your niche, 20,000 people in your niche? So when it comes to educating on your product or selling your product, you have your audience sitting in front of you at the, you know, at a click, at an email. And so that's the whole point, is that you if you're doing agri-tech, are probably not going to generate an audience as big as someone like Stephen Bartlett, because he talks more broadly about life, you know, personal development, relationships, etc. But you could develop an incredible audience that are interested in your product. And that is the point with personal brand. It's not about size, it's about the quality of the audience. Nicola says, hi, Chris, really good workshop. Thank you very much. I'm a bootstrap consultant business. How would you understand? Is the accelerator right for me? I mean, I was a bootstrap founder for a long time. I've also done venture-backed businesses since. And I think you just have to think to yourself about what Eric said. So Eric said, the thing that you're selling, is it worth the value? And so you have to answer the question, I can't do it for you. Is you having a super high quality audience, not necessarily a massive one, but super high quality audience of your target demographic following you and listening to you every single day, is that worth the money? Because that's the question. Because if you can't justify the answer, definitely not. And I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about any self-development, any personal development, any professional development. You need to justify whether the value of the audience is worth the investment, because that's the key. Okay, so great question here about tactics. How would I combine LinkedIn growth and YouTube growth? So what I would say about LinkedIn, about newsletter, about X, about Substack is that written content is actually a lot less personally invasive than video content. And so video content, whether it's lives, whether it's Instagram Reels, TikTok, or whether it's YouTube, is much more time consuming. Now, if you're going to do YouTube, I have a new YouTube channel launching in the next couple of weeks, actually. It is a very time intensive investment. You have to be on camera doing long form content, adding value. And if you don't have well-defined structure as to how you speak and well-defined structure as to how you teach, it's going to be very hard to come up with all of that and present that. So I would say to early on creators, start with written content, understand how to create frameworks and some intellectual property around your business. And then once you've got that, maybe then start with video. Because if you master video, the opportunity and the value is enormous. I always think like even me doing a podcast for a series or two series and creating some content had massive benefits for my business. But it is maybe to a multiple of 5 times harder than written content, if I'm honest with you. Jason says, I've joined communities before where people were just starting out and couldn't help each other. What's the caliber of people? So it's very different. I think the price point makes the audience better by default because we're taking on people who are more advanced in business. And so we have like 7, 8, 9-figure founders, to be honest with you. We have a lot of people who are solo founders who generate a lot of money as well. And so the caliber is incredibly strong. And this is the thing is that like I talk a lot about finding your Eric and finding your team and accountability buddies. Like the Creator Accelerator is normally where people find their accountability buddy. It's very, very common for that to be a thing. Neil says, are there business types that personal brands don't work for? I'm sure that there actually is. I would be hard pressed to think what they are. Maybe government contracts. But for me, like if you're building a business and you don't think personal brand would work for you, I would go and explore all your competitors in multiple different locations and see if anyone has a personal brand that's doing very well. And then I would try and search the type of content that your ICP is interested in and see if that content will do well. Because if I can go and find content that my ICP likes, and I can go and create that content, I have become the person. And so if no one's posting in my space, but I can build an audience, I become the person. And that becomes very important. So if I take you back 10 years to when I was running Verb, from 25 years old to about 29, 30 years old, I became a dominant voice within the luxury branding space, luxury digital marketing space. And that meant that there were like 5 or 6 other great agencies out there that did luxury marketing, and they were older than us, more experienced than us, bigger teams than us, and I suppose had much more credibility than us. However, the voice that everyone heard at all the conferences, online, newsletters, and everything continued to be me. And that meant that all the attention rose to the top. And so I just got put on the pitch list for Bugatti, Aston Martin, Ritz, Harrods, LVMH. And so I didn't win every single one of those pitches first time, but I was invited to the pitch. And that was because of my personal brand. So, Caroline, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, very good. We've been live 4 hours with thousands and thousands of people live. It's been amazing.
Incredible,
Yeah,
incredible. Thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I suppose all I would just want is you to tell us your experience of working with us at TCA. Introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I suppose the value that you got from working with us at the TCA.
Yes, happy to. So, 2 years ago, I started on posting regularly on LinkedIn. I had 713 followers. I had zero idea what I was doing. Um, and I really was in this transition phase. I had just sold a yoga studio. My kids got a little older, so they were all in school. And I really was trying to figure out what was next for me. So, over the course of many, many long, long months, I built up a small group of connections through what I imagine many of you are likely doing right now, which is commenting for hours a day, second guessing myself. I had my 7-year-old was like my art director, and I'd be like, which post do you like better? Which visual looks better? And spending 7 hours on a post that would get 9 likes. So it was incredibly slow going. and a lot of effort for really not a lot of payoff, which is when I saw Chris's post about the Creator Accelerator. And I just got such a good feeling about the program, about Chris, about this work. And I literally signed up on the spot. And because I knew, and this may ring true for some of you as well, but I didn't have people in my life who were doing things like this, who were doing this work, who were putting themselves out there, who were trying to build something new. So it felt really important to me to seek this out. And I wanted to be around people doing big things and going places that I wanted to go. So I joined the Creator Accelerator, and there's three things that I will share about my experience. So the first is the thing that stood out to me right away was this spirit of generosity. So it starts with Chris and this team, but also trickles down to all the members that are in it. So there's so much wisdom here from Chris and the coaches and Josh and Dora and everyone. But also among the other members. So people are experts in all of these different fields. And everyone was so willing to share what they knew, so willing to spend time and send links. And really, there was it just felt so that if you wanted to learn something, you were in the right place for it. The second thing is that Chris teaches from this lens of an entrepreneur and a business person. So for someone like me who didn't have a very specific business plan, I really was just starting out to see what was out there. I really found that all the lessons were created with this idea of not just like, how do I get followers and likes, but how does this impact me? What is this creating? What is my strategy? How do I want to approach this? And it was almost like open my eyes to all of the possibility that's on this platform in a way you don't know what you don't know. So it really like created this like aha moments of, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that this was an option, that these were the possibilities here. And the third thing is something that I see now when I reflect back on it, but at the time, I don't think was as obvious for me. But it really is not about, for me at the time, wasn't about the metrics and the numbers. And to be fair, all of that is really wonderful. It's so cool to get a post that does really well. And it's really wonderful to build an email list by many of thousands of people and get sponsorship deals. Like all of that stuff is so incredible. So I don't want to discredit it because it's important. But for me, I think looking back now, the biggest change was a shift in how I saw myself because for so long I was like just a mom. And then I got to become a person, a mom who is built confidence in herself to put herself out there every single day, to work on a business, having not really a lot of business background, to do like marketing and start programs and, build something that I hope is impactful for others and feels really meaningful to me. So those three things I think are the things that really shifted how I see myself in this world and my role here and my business and all that. So if you're someone who is very advanced in your business or someone who is like me, who is just starting out and really not quite sure even what you really want to do with it yet, I think there is a place for all of it in the Creator Accelerator because there's so many things that you can choose from. And it's not like, oh, this is so basic or I know this or this is too advanced for me. Like there's a way to sort of meet you where you are. So I'm so grateful to have been part of this, honestly, because it really has been such a positive impact for me in my own life. So it's really my pleasure to share with all of you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think that will ring true with so many people because I think people take for granted, like when you post a lot online, that you must be really confident, but actually confidence grows the more that you do things. And only my really close friends in life would know that like I am the most introverted person that my best friends know. As in my wife would be like, you are the worst introvert. But I think that personal brand does allow you to almost tap into a superpower, which is building your own confidence and achieving all of these outcomes. So Thank you so much for saying that, and thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. I suppose, technically speaking, all the seats that were on discount have sold. They actually sold before I said it last time. And so to the people who reached out, we will keep chatting. I really appreciate everyone coming today, because I think for me, I'm just trying to spread the things that have worked for me and my businesses in my life are the things that I know can work for other people. I believe that anyone can be what they want to be. I believe that hard work, consistency over a long period of time compounds in a way that you cannot imagine. I believe that the path that's in front of me right now is incredible, but the path that will open for me next year, the year after that, will be something that I cannot even imagine right now. If you told me my life would be as it is right now, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. It just wouldn't have been conceivable that I'm able to do what I am now. And so I wanted to say thank you to everyone on this call. Thank you to everyone who watches it afterwards. We have had thousands and thousands of people live. And so I really deeply appreciate everyone showing up. If you have 4 questions that you want the answer to, reach out to the team and I. We will try and help everyone that we possibly can. If you do the Creator Accelerator, I cannot wait to work with you. It is the most fun that I have all year. And seeing other people become completely kick-ass at lead generation makes my day. And spending time with people and teaching them and learning from them is the best thing that I do all year. So I just want to say from me, thank you very much for tuning in. I will send out all the content to you afterwards. Make sure, this is a boring technical point, but make sure that you check your promotions folders and your spam folders. We will send you all the resources from today. We'll make sure that all questions are answered from today. And I want to say a massive thank you to our speakers. By the way, Daniel Priestley, Sarah Davies, Eric Partaker, Nathan Barry, like what the hell? Just had live to thousands of people. Thank you to those that gave references. Much love, everyone. Take it easy. Thank you so much. Peace out.